Chapter 1111. Reality proved that Qin Yu's worries weren't unfounded. He approached the carriage to intercept the demon and punched out. His fist was wrapped in a layer of incomparably thick and pitch-black demonic power. With a loud bang, the entire carriage violently shook. The strength of the shaking caused the demonic power around his fist to disperse. A massive wound opened up on the surface of his fist, revealing scarlet flesh and pale white bone. At the sight of this, Yunlan's face turned even paler. This was because the defensive demonic runes covering the carriage were now stained with a bit of black. Like a wriggling worm, it constantly spread outwards. The wound on his fist rapidly healed without a single drop of blood flowing out. Without hesitation, the demon punched out a second time. Bang! A trembling fluctuation pierced through the carriage's defenses and crashed into it. Yunlan coughed, bitterness in her eyes. The defensive demonic runes that the patriarch had personally laid down were incomparably powerful. Even if there was a super powerhouse outside the carriage that could form a domain, it still wouldn't be so easy to break through its defenses. There was a problem. In this world, there was nothing that was absolutely perfect. Even the demonic runes laid down by the patriarch had flaws. It was clear that the terrifying powerhouse outside the carriage knew the weakness of the demonic runes ahead of time. There wouldn't be a problem with the patriarch. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a need to go through so much trouble to kill her. Then there was only one possibility. There was a traitor in the clan, and one with a very high status that even obtained the absolute trust of the patriarch. Otherwise, today's events wouldn't have occurred. No matter who it was, they had succeeded. The originally impregnable carriage wouldn't be able to last much longer. This was only the second punch. Soon it would collapse. At that time, Yunlan took a deep breath, suppressing her thoughts. Even though Qin Yu always thought she was a very stupid woman, he still didn't believe her. Although Qin Yu always thought she was a stupid woman, the truth was that if she could perfectly play the role of Yunlan and obtain the approval of the old king's bloodline, she definitely wasn't a brainless woman. She looked up at Qin Yu. "Before the carriage is broken, if the patriarch doesn't arrive, then kill me." Black lines appeared on Qin Yu's face. Yunlan thought he was worried. She lightly said, "Don't worry. Even if the patriarch learns of this, he will only thank you." Qin Yu coughed. "Can you do it yourself?" "No." Yunlan was silent for a moment. "I cannot commit suicide. This involves a secret of the clan that I cannot tell you. Therefore, I can only ask for your help." Qin Yu relaxed a little. The reason he deliberately asked was to confirm this point. Otherwise, if Yunlan were to become excited and kill himself, his plan would fail. Now, since it was like this, perhaps this ambush would be an excellent opportunity for him to move Yunlan. Despicable? Maybe a little, but it's better than deceiving people's feelings, right? I had no other choice. After finding a reason for himself, Qin Yu immediately felt much calmer. Sure enough, comforting himself was very useful. Then next, he had to make it look more realistic. At most, he would suffer a bit. No, he had to suffer a bit. Otherwise, how could he fool Yunwia's eyes? That sly old bastard was not easy to deal with. With this thought in mind, he maintained his composure and revealed an awkward expression. "Cloud Mist, are you sure you want me to kill you?" Bang! The carriage shook violently. The defensive patterns on its surface flashed furiously, but they were unable to pierce through it. The spreading black gas actually stimulated it and caused it to spread even faster. Yunlan's complexion paled. "Yes. Remember, you must kill me. It's best if you destroy my corpse as well." As she spoke to hear, she pursed her lips, panic in her eyes. In this vast world, who didn't fear death? Moreover, she was a woman who had patiently endured for her family and lived to this day. In fact, she hadn't even lived a single day in the dark abyss with her own identity. If she were to die like this, of course she would be afraid and unwilling. Qin Yu hesitated. This woman, Yunlan, was already pitiful enough. If he continued to lie to her like this, it would be a bit too much. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. He had no other choice at worst. He would just give her some compensation in the future. All right, I agree. Hearing Qin Yu speak, Yunlan let out a sigh of relief. But at the same time, she couldn't suppress her disappointment. It seems that he really doesn't have any thoughts towards me. Otherwise, even if I were the one asking him to kill me on my own initiative, he would still struggle a little. What a ruthless man! This caused Yunlan to feel as if she had been betrayed, even if she didn't want to admit it. But in truth, from the moment she was willing to speak to Qin Yu about the marriage, some subtle emotions had already begun to form in her heart. Qin Yu did notice the subtle changes in Yunlan's expression. He looked at the demon outside the window and narrowed his eyes. Domain. Hey, Tiangang had once said that he could also form one. At that time, although Old Fox hadn't said anything, his eyes had turned a bit red. In other words, only a peak demon commander that touched upon the threshold of the Demon King could form a domain. Other demon commanders wouldn't be able to do so. From this, one could roughly judge the strength of the demon outside. After Liao Shi left, Qin Yu hadn't truly fought yet. But after obtaining his half-dragon body, his strength had undoubtedly risen greatly. Against a Demon King-level demon, he likely wouldn't be able to do anything. But against a Demon Commander-level demon, there shouldn't be anything to fear. Moreover, it wasn't as if he didn't have other methods. The Nightmare bloodline had given him several times, and he had displayed an incomparably formidable might each time. Self-preservation shouldn't be a problem. Then, what he needed to consider now was how to make this play more realistic. Bang, the fifth punch! He continued to attack. Even though the demon was tyrannically strong, he still suffered a considerable backlash. At this time, the wounds on his palms began to heal at a much slower rate. Finally, blood dripped down. But the defensive demonic runes on the carriage in front of him had nearly been completely extinguished. There was less than 20% of what it was when it was in perfect condition. This was the last punch. If this punch fell, it would be enough to shatter the carriage and his mission would be complete. He had to be quick. There couldn't be any delays. That old bastard Yunwei was rushing over and could arrive at any moment. If he wanted to escape unscathed, he had to do it before that happened. So, even though he had been injured by the backlash, he still didn't hesitate to kill the demon. Bang, the sixth punch! Yunlan closed his eyes and shouted out loud, "Qin Yu, kill me!" The carriage couldn't stop him. The patriarch hadn't arrived yet, but perhaps he would arrive soon. But this short period of time was like the difference between the heavens and earth. Qin Yu, he was able to directly confront the city lord of Dark Peak. His strength was formidable, but to say he could resist the demon? Yunlan didn't believe it. After all, an existence that could form such a formidable domain was only a step away from the king's step. Even if this sort of existence was inferior to the patriarch, the difference was similar. It was already good luck that Qin Yu was able to escape on his own. How could he protect her? Death was her only choice. No matter what plot this enemy had, it would all come to nothing. Bang, kacha! Kacha! The final defensive mageweth was completely extinguished. The carriage instantly disintegrated. 6 consecutive punches had already shattered it. It was only because of the defensive runes that it remained intact. Yunlan screamed out, "Qin Yu! Hurry up and attack, otherwise it would be too late. I have no way of killing you, and right now, you might not be in a desperate situation." Qin Yu shouted out loud. His figure hulled forwards, his fist crashing down. Yunlan's eyes widened. This was a scene she never imagined would occur. Did Qin Yu not know how formidable the demon trying to kill him was? No, with his status and strength, he definitely knew that it was impossible for him to be their match. If he did, he would only be seeking his own death. He would rather risk his life than kill me. As soon as she thought of this, her heart began to wildly beat in her chest. Her eyes blurred, and she couldn't help but bite her lips. Bang! In a battle between powerhouses, an instant was enough. Before Yunlan could think any further, Qin Yu had already engaged the demon, trying to kill him. Heaven-shaking explosions erupted one after another. Wild fluctuations of strength swept out in all directions like raging waves. The fog that condensed the domain began to violently tumble about. The ground constantly collapsed, forming pitch-black cracks. It had already been mentioned before. Strictly speaking, a domain was a small world that was replicated. It wasn't a true existence. Now, the cracks in the ground were caused by the damage that the domain had sustained. The demon trying to kill him's eyes brightened, a cold and gloomy light appearing in them. He never imagined that Qin Yu, who traveled with Yunlan, would possess such formidable strength. Now he seemed to be hoping to borrow the fluctuations from their battle to attack the stability of the domain. This was a correct idea, but unfortunately, Qin Yu seemed to have overestimated his own strength. Within the domain he was the supreme king. Even a demon king-level existence might be able to fight him. Die! With a loud shout, the demon trying to kill him punched out. In the void above his head, there was a loud roar. The phantom of a terrifying beast appeared. Its body was blurry, and there was only a pair of blood-red eyes. They were scarlet red, as if they had absorbed an endless amount of fresh blood. Bang! Qin Yu rapidly drew backwards. The clothes on his chest were torn to shreds, exposing his flesh and blood. A deep purple fist mark formed there. The surrounding flesh and blood split apart. Wounds spread out like a spider web, covering his entire chest. His flesh and blood wriggled as if it wanted to regenerate, but it was constantly torn apart by the residual strength in the fist mark. Puff! Qin Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion paled. He glanced at Yunlan from the corner of his eyes and saw that she was nervously staring at him. He had succeeded. This fist strike was worth it. Although it was a bit heavy, the truth was that a large part of Qin Yu's current pitiful appearance was an act. His half-dragon body was far more formidable than he had imagined. After suffering such a heavy blow, the blood in his chest tumbled for a moment before finally calming down. In fact, if Qin Yu wanted to, he could even restore these wounds to their original state with a single thought. If that was the case, then there was nothing to worry about. He could act as pitifully as possible so that Yunlan could see everything. In order to save you, I was struck countless times and nearly lost my life. Isn't this kindness too great? With such a great kindness, if I make a request, you won't feel ashamed to refuse? As long as you agree, then there is a possibility. As for Yunwia, as long as Yunlan agreed, that old fox might not dare to completely tear apart all pretense of cordiality with Qin Yu. That's right, that was it. Qin Yu was overjoyed. As he looked at the demon, trying to kill him, he felt much more pleasing to the eye. After all, if he hadn't come to him on his own initiative, how could he have so easily found a chance to break out of his predicament? He could feel the eyes of Qin Yu, who had suffered a heavy blow to his chest and was now looking at him. The demon, trying to kill him, stiffened. A strange look appeared in his eyes. This kind of look? What did it mean? Did he still have a hidden card? He clearly knew how fierce he was, and yet he still dared to rush out and confront him. Unless there was something wrong with his head and he wanted to die, he definitely had a hidden card. That's right, that's right. I have to be careful and not fail miserably. After all, the bloodline of the old king wasn't someone to be provoked. Otherwise, why would the person behind him have any ideas about Yunlan? They would have long since overturned the old king's bloodline. But being cautious was being cautious. He still had to act quickly. If he delayed any longer, that old thing Yunwia would really arrive. He took a deep breath and puffed out his chest. The demon, trying to kill him, lifted a hand and thrust it forwards. The terrifying phantom of a giant beast rumbled forwards. If he was worried about being tricked and he was also in a hurry, then he could only attack with everything he had. Bang! Qin Yu was sent flying backwards. As he flew through the air, There was a series of crackling sounds as countless wounds opened up on his body. Blood gushed out from every orifice of his head. He crashed into the ground, creating a massive pit. The demon didn't bother with Qin Yu any longer. He sneered and rushed towards Yunlan. Catching her was the key to today's mission. In midair, he furrowed his eyebrows. In the next moment, a phantom rushed over from the side, grabbing onto him and sending him flying away. Yunlan covered her mouth. She could clearly see that at this time, Qin Yu's entire body was dyed red and his head was covered in blood. Even if this wasn't happening to her body, she could still feel the severe wounds he was withstanding. It must be excruciatingly painful. Even so, Qin Yu was still risking his life. As for why he was risking his life, it was so that she could continue living. Yunlan had to admit that she couldn't understand Qin Yu's thoughts right now. When she mentioned the marriage, he had rejected her without hesitation. But now, in order to save her, he was willing to disregard his life and death. Qin Yu's character had become contradictory in her heart. But without a doubt, this character had left an incomparably deep impression in her heart. After all, in this world, there was no one who could ignore someone who was risking their life for them. In particular, a woman who appeared calm and strong on the surface, but was actually afraid and weak on the inside. Moreover, she had already decided to welcome death. "Out of my way!" The demon shouted out loud, and demonic energy wildly erupted from his body. But Qin Yu was like a plaster stuck to his body. No matter how much strength he released, he couldn't shake him away. Of course, even though he wasn't shaken away, Qin Yu's injuries became increasingly severe. His entire body was covered in wounds. Blood gushed out, soaking his entire body and dripping to the ground. If one looked carefully, they would discover that there wasn't a single part of Qin Yu's body that was intact. His entire person was like a broken drum that had been ruthlessly hammered. However, it was only his skin that was torn open. It wasn't too serious an injury. His bones would have to break as well. But although his bones were being hammered after absorbing the dragon blood, they had become incomparably hard. If he wanted to break Qin Yu's bones now, it was still a bit off. Forget it, he would rely on himself. Breaking a few bones would be more realistic. That old fox Yunwuya should be arriving soon. Kacha! Kacha! After making his decision, the sound of bones breaking began to ring out from within Qin Yu's body. The demon felt as if he were about to go insane. Even a mountain should have been hammered to pieces by now, right? This fellow actually hadn't died yet. Moreover, he had only been hammering out flesh and blood just now, so how come his bones were suddenly breaking? And there was a considerable number of them. In this short period of time, there had to be at least several dozen of them. He didn't feel like he had used too much strength. Or could it be that this boy had exhausted all his strength and couldn't continue? No, that wasn't right. This boy looked incomparably miserable right now, and as time passed, he would become even more miserable. But the demon knew that Qin Yu's hands that were holding him didn't soften at all. Rather, they were as firm and powerful as before. Just what was going on? Damn it, he was a dignified existence below the Demon King, and yet he couldn't even kill a nameless nobody. If this were any other time or situation, the demon was confident that as long as he was patient, he could slowly grind Qin Yu to death. If 100 punches couldn't kill him, then what about 1,000? If that wasn't enough, then 10,000 punches should be enough. But right now, what he lacked was time. He couldn't delay any longer. Yun Wuya could arrive at any moment. At that time, not only would all his previous efforts be wasted, but he would also die. Yun Wuya, as he thought of that old thing's methods, the demon's pupils shrank. Then, endless cruelty surged in his eyes. Damn it. He originally didn't want to use his ultimate move, but now he had no other choice. He had to tear this boy to shreds in order to dispel the hatred in his heart. The demon clenched his teeth. The point between his eyebrows suddenly exploded. Blood gushed out, and a rich blood light erupted from his body. The moment this blood light appeared, Qin Yu's heart violently shrank. He cursed inwardly. This fellow was going all out. Although he didn't know what this bloodlight was, his intuition told him that it was best not to touch it. Otherwise, even if he had a half-dragon body, he would still be in deep trouble. Letting go, Qin Yu clutched his chest. With a dull thumping sound, he was sent flying backwards. The demon was stunned. He hadn't even had a chance to attack yet. So how could he have been sent flying backwards? Moreover, did he hit him just now? What the hell was that bang? But at this time, the demon wasn't in the mood to think too much about it. He glanced at Qin Yu, who was sent flying away, and then turned to rush towards Yunlan. Although he wished that he could catch Qin Yu and tear him to pieces to vent his anger, he hadn't completely lost his reason. He knew what he should do. Only by catching Yunlan would everything he did today have any meaning. Otherwise, even if he killed Qin Yu, he would still be in deep trouble. To dare to kill one of the Nightmare Bloodline's contenders for the throne, if he didn't give a satisfactory result, those people behind him would definitely be the first to jump out and kill him. Shua, a blood light flashed. The demon rushed towards Yunlan. But the result this time was a repeat of last time. Just as he rushed out, he was sent flying backwards. Moreover, this collision was even more vicious. The demon's head buzzed and his vision darkened. He felt as if he had been attacked by an enraged bull. After tumbling around twice and shaking his head, a sweet smell filled his nose and mouth. It was only then that his vision became clear. Then, the demon that intercepted him saw Qin Yu desperately slapping his body, trying to extinguish the blood flames that stained him. It was that bastard again. The demon's eyes turned red. This brat wanted to harm him. If he continued to toss and turn like this, then when Yunwia arrived, he would definitely die. "You bastard, die for me!" With a loud roar, the demon rushed forwards. He understood that if he didn't kill this bastard, he wouldn't be able to catch Yunlan. Just because he couldn't be hammered to death didn't mean he couldn't be burned to death. The blood flames burning around him were his greatest trump card. This was originally a life-saving trump card in case Yun Wuya chased him down. If it weren't for this bastard, he wouldn't have been forced out. Now he would thoroughly burn him down and let him understand what it meant to seek death. Qin Yu turned and ran. This was just a play. It was true that he pursued realistic effects, but he couldn't turn this play into reality just because of this. He couldn't provoke the blood flames. If he could delay for time and wait for the main character to catch up, then everything would be over. As soon as the demon saw Qin Yu run away, the demon diabolically grinned. He thought that it was already too late to be afraid. "Run. I want to see just where you can run off to. In front of me. Do you think you have any leeway to run?" But reality proved that there really was leeway, and the range wasn't small at all. After chasing Qin Yu for a little while, the demon's complexion changed. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. This brat had been overtaken, but in the blink of an eye he had run away again. Once or twice was fine, but this was already the fourth time. He cheated. He had been played. The demon's entire body was wrapped in blood flames. He came to a sudden stop, his eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. The blood flames around his body rose to a whole new level. Chapter 11:12. Bang! At this time there was a loud explosion that caused the entire realm to fiercely shake. At this time, a part of the realm began to bulge outwards. Fog wildly surged, forming a dreadful palm. Someone from the outside had arrived and had already begun to attack, wanting to break through the realm. It was Yun Wuya, that old thing. The intercepting demon trembled. He glared at Qin Yu, the hatred and killing intent in his eyes enough to freeze the soul. It was all this bastard's fault. If it weren't for Qin Yu's previous battle with him, the impact on the realm would have caused a certain degree of strength to leak out. No matter how formidable Yun Wuya was, he would still need some time to lock onto the position of the realm. Of course, more importantly, if it weren't for Qin Yu, he would have already captured Yunlan and wouldn't have waited until now. Yun Vuya had arrived, and he had already used his trump cards. The chances of him surviving today were minuscule. He was a formidable existence that was just a step away from the Demon King's step. His future possibilities were infinite, and once he smoothly broke through, he would enter a brand new world. But now, all of this had become a bubble. The intercepting demon had no confidence that he could escape from Yun Wuya's hands. In other words, from this moment on, his chances of survival were nearly severed. And all of this was caused by Qin Yu. If he could choose, he would eat the demon's flesh and sleep on his skin. But he was going to die. A dead demon would lose all value, but he still had bloodline descendants. If he wanted them to continue living, he had to complete today's mission. Bang! The intercepting demon's body blazed with blood flames. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a blood flame giant that grasped at Yunlan. The space between the 5 fingers, which were wrapped in scarlet flames and burning endlessly, rapidly collapsed and a black hole appeared. A formidable swallowing strength erupted from the black hole. It locked onto Yunlan and pulled her over. At this time, he no longer wished to live. Instead, he placed himself in the path of death to erupt with an even more terrifying strength. Qin Yu's complexion changed. This fellow was going all out. The blood flames were burning his own flesh and blood. Within the blood flame giant, the intercepting demon that controlled everything withered away, becoming like a dried-up corpse. Only his eyes were brighter than before. "Patriarch, save me!" Yunlan screamed. She could already feel Yun Wuya's aura outside the realm. Boom and earth-shattering boom reverberated throughout Evil Peak City. The space before them shook violently as cracks appeared and rapidly spread in all directions. The phantom of an illusory world appeared in the shattered space. The edges of the world shook as if great waves were set off. One could vaguely see what was happening within. Yun Wuya's face was as dark as still water, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Looking at the scene in front of him, his chest was burning. Good, very good. To think that there were actually people from their side in the Council of Elders. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been held up today. To make a move on Yunlan time and time again, attempting to push the entire lineage of the old king into a state of eternal damnation. Did they really think that he wouldn't fly into a rage? Swoosh, swoosh, the sound of something piercing through the air could be heard as a dozen figures whistled through the air, their eyes wide as they stared at the scene before them. Of course, these were only some of their emotions on the surface. As for what they were thinking in their hearts, no one knew. Yun Wuya, this is Eventide City, the ancestral land. If you attack without restraint, it will be a great crime if you cause any disturbance. One of the devils shouted in a low voice, his expression cold. Scram! Yun Wuya roared. He raised his hand and punched out. In that instant, a towering demonic figure appeared behind him and punched forward. The devil's pupils constricted, and his face was filled with shock and anger. He clearly hadn't expected that Yun Wuya would attack without a word. Boom! With a loud explosion, the devil opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying, smashing through countless buildings along the way. This scene caused the expressions of all the devils that had just arrived to change. Their hearts were shaken. Yun Wuya's strength was stronger than they had expected. Or perhaps this old thing had been hiding his strength all this time. Although his cultivation level was restricted by the agreement of the clan and his bloodline, and he couldn't break through to the king level, his true strength had probably far surpassed the limits of a devil general. At this moment, the blood flame giant suddenly appeared in the shattered space. In the next moment, Yunlan's cry for help could be faintly heard. Yun Wuya roared. Anyone who dares to stop me will die. As he roared, he raised his hand and punched out at the domain. Humph! Yun Wuya, how impressive of you! Erfing City is my nightmare ancestral land, not a place where you can behave atrociously. With a cold laugh, a figure appeared. He raised his hand and pressed forward. With a heaven-shaking roar, Yun Wuya's punch was blocked. It was Elder Qishan of the ancient king bloodline. As their gazes fell on this person, more and more devils that had arrived subconsciously retreated. This was one of the strongest members of the nightmare race and was known to be invincible below the Devil King level. The reason why he was called Qishang was because he had once fought against 7 experts of the same level with a single strike. In the end, he had defeated all 7 of them and forced them to flee with heavy injuries. 2 of them had even died from their injuries. After this battle, Elder Qishang's name had spread far and wide. Yun Huia took a deep breath and then produced a command medallion. The medallion was completely black, and its surface was smooth and glossy. However, as soon as the devils saw it, their pupils constricted and expressions of astonishment appeared on their faces. Black token. Order to decide life and death. Order of death. As they cried out, the people that had been retreating all turned and ran as if they had seen a ghost. What nonsense! The black token had already appeared. Why didn't they run as far away as they could? Were they just going to stay and wait for death? For any faction, once their strength reached a certain level, there would be different voices within them. This was normal and no one could avoid it. But while it was unavoidable, it couldn't lead to a large-scale internal strife that was beyond their control. Thus, the black token appeared within the nightmare race. Of course, this was just a simple name based on its appearance. In reality, it had another more detailed and resounding name, the Order of Death. Within the nightmare race, once one's strength and status reached a certain level, they were qualified to apply for a black token from the king. This token was used to resolve irreconcilable conflicts between powerful existences within the race. Once it was used, both sides would sign a life and death contract. In a great battle, only one person would survive. The loser's life would be the end of their hatred. Because of this, it was called the Order of Death. Once the order was issued, someone would die. Seeing this scene, everyone knew that Yun Huia was really going to fight with his life on the line. He should run as far away as he could. 7 Kill's expression changed and his eyes darkened. He didn't think that Yun Huia would have something like the black token. He wasn't afraid of fighting with his life on the line, but this time the ancient king's bloodline had the upper hand. The battle for the new king was already in the bag. Of course, the most important thing was that he wasn't absolutely confident that he could kill Yun Huia. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wasted so much time talking. He would have directly activated the black token and hammered this bastard to pieces. But in this situation, if he backed down, it would be too humiliating. For a moment, he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yun Huia took a step forward and exerted some force in his fingers. The surface of the black token in his hand immediately began to emit a faint light. This is the last time. Get out of my way. 7 Kills was filled with hatred, and a vicious light flashed in his eyes. Yun Huia, that old bastard, was really too much. Just as he was about to grit his teeth and agree, another figure barged in and said in a low voice, "All right, don't be rash." He looked at Yun Huia. Elder 7 Kills is just worried that your actions will affect the ancestral land. He doesn't really want to stop you. This matter ends here. We won't stop you from doing whatever you want to do. He grabbed 7 Kills with one hand and pulled him to the side. Of course, 7 Kills had to put on an appropriate expression of indignation and reluctance, as if he would have hammered him to death if Yun Huia hadn't stopped him. If he didn't do this, he would lose all face. Humph. Yun Huia snorted coldly. He didn't have time to talk to them at all. His figure moved, and he charged into the domain. Boom! With a punch, the entire domain shook violently, while demonic power swept out, and large swathes of demonic energy were destroyed and scattered. Crack! Crack! Cracks appeared on the surface of the domain. Yun Huia had attacked with his full strength, and the power that erupted from him shocked everyone. Elder 7 Kills' mouth twitched, and a dark look appeared in his eyes. Yun Huia, that old bastard, really lived up to his title as the King of Shadows. He had hidden himself so deeply. If it weren't for the fact that Yunlan was in danger today, Elder Seven Kills would have continued to hide. Who knew when he would have suffered at Yunlan's hands? Black Ling, fortunately he hadn't been rash just now. Otherwise, although he didn't want to admit it, he really might have been beaten to death. The person who had pulled Elder Seven Kills away just now was another powerful figure in the ancient king's bloodline, Marquis Qianjun. It wasn't a name, but a title that had been passed down from his ancestors. In the nightmare race, it was a famous and golden signboard. Although he had only obtained his current status because of his ancestors, in reality, no one in the nightmare race dared to underestimate Marquis Qianjun in the slightest. His current status wasn't something that could be determined simply by a title passed down from his ancestors. His methods and strength were both top-notch. Marquis Qianjun looked at Yun Wuya with a serious expression. As expected, Yun Wuya's strength was stronger than he had imagined. If not for this, he wouldn't have had to go through so much trouble to deal with the previous king's bloodline. The abyssal royal bloodline, was born noble and had all kinds of resources. They were the descendants of the heavens that everyone envied. But in this world, where there were gains, there were losses. If Yun Wuya wasn't a descendant of the royal bloodline, even if he came from an ordinary background, with his potential and aptitude, his current achievements would probably be far greater than what he was today. There could only be one king in a race. This was a limit set by the will of the abyss, but it was also a thorn in the hearts of the members of the abyssal royal bloodline, who didn't want to become a king. But there was only one throne. If you weren't willing, then you could only fight for it. Marquis Qianjun's eyes flashed for a moment before he calmed down. It was too early to say all this. Once the new king's throne was settled, perhaps he could come into contact with Yun Wuya. Whoosh. Chapter 11:13. The three people inside the bounded domain did not know what was happening outside, but there was no doubt that the bounded domain was about to be broken. Roar the blood flame, giant, roared towards the sky. The space between its 5 fingers collapsed, and the devouring power of the black hole formed became even stronger. Yunlan could no longer resist, and was sent flying over. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. That old bastard Yun Wuya. He wasn't as strong as he appeared to be. It had been so long, and he still hadn't come in. He didn't know what the black hole in the blood flames was, but he definitely couldn't just watch as Yunlan was sucked into it. Otherwise, his previous act of joy and suffering so many blows would have been in vain. In the end, he still had to rely on himself. It wasn't to the extent of risking his life, but he was afraid that if he acted too much, he might give himself away. Qin Yu clenched his teeth and moved. He couldn't care about anything else right now. He spread his arms and pulled Yunlan into his embrace. This doesn't feel right. Looking down, Qin Yu's heartbeat quickened and blood nearly sprayed out from his nose. Perhaps it was because he was unable to control the power in his body. Yunlan's disguise had lost its effect, and he had reverted to the appearance of a woman. His robe had been torn apart by the devouring power of the black hole. When he was in his disguise, it was still fine. TSK, TSK. Almost everything that shouldn't be exposed was exposed. The temptation was beyond imagination. Damn it! Qin Yu's body inevitably began to change. This wasn't because his willpower was so poor. This was because when Yunlan returned to being a woman, the sinful attraction between them exploded once again. Not to mention, Qin Yu was holding her tightly in his arms, and their skin was touching. Dong-dong in his chest. The heart of the abyss seemed to be rebelling. It pounded madly, pushing the blood in his body to circulate at an astonishing speed. On the surface of his eyeballs, the fine blood vessels rapidly congealed, causing his eyes to turn scarlet. He fiercely bit down on the tip of his tongue and forcefully restored his composure. He didn't dare to hug Yunlan anymore, nor did he care that he might hurt her. He pushed her away from his chest. Wrapped in bloody flames, the killing devil had really gone crazy. Just as he was about to catch Yunlan, this bastard rushed out again. A hero saving a damsel in distress? An unkillable cockroach, huh? Let's see if your flesh can withstand the burning of the nether blood flame. You must die today. Roar with a roar, the devouring power released by the black hole sword. At the same time, the blood flame giant's other hand reached out to grab Chinyu. The demons hated him to the bone. They wanted to capture him with their own hands and burn him to ashes, bit by bit with the netherworld blood flame. That won't do. I can't die. I have to live. Chinyu glanced over. Even if they didn't need to do anything, they would still have to burn themselves to ashes in the end to kill the demons. You're already in such a state. It's not worth it to risk my life against you. I'll just use the old rules to stall for time. The cloud mist was pushed away, and the heart of the abyss gradually calmed down. The redness in its eyes dissipated, but before it could completely disappear, a black spot appeared and began to expand outwards. At this moment, his eyes had become pitch black, icy cold, and desolate. There wasn't the slightest fluctuation in them, and they seemed like an endless night that could devour everything. The blood flame giant froze for a moment, and the slaughter devil in its center froze on the spot. In fact, more than half of the devouring power imprisoning Chinyu dissipated. Swoosh he turned around and left. In the next moment, the blood flame giant regained its freedom. But it didn't attack again. Instead, it stared at Chinyu, its corpse-like face filled with horror. Abyssal gaze, it's the abyssal gaze. How is this possible? He has already awakened it. Could he be the reincarnation of the previous king? Shock, disbelief, all sorts of intense emotions wove together, but they soon dissipated, leaving behind nothing but endless heat. Royal bloodline, the true royal bloodline, and it had already awakened. If the nightmare race knew of this, then the struggle for the throne would become meaningless. Because as long as this boy entered the ancestral land, he would naturally become the new king. And without a doubt, this was a chance for survival that had suddenly appeared in his desperate situation. It could even be called the greatest lucky chance of his life. Kill Chinyu, swallow his bloodline, and then forcefully open the ancestral land. Once he succeeded, not only would he be able to escape death, but he would also become one of the highest existences in the abyss. Die! With a loud shout, the slaughtered devil ignited all of his strength without hesitation. At this time, it wasn't just his flesh and blood that was burning. His soul, bloodline, will. Everything became fuel for the netherworld blood fire. If he succeeded, he would obtain a new life and achieve great merits. If he failed, he would completely vanish, vanishing from this world forever. This was truly and thoroughly vanishing, without a single trace remaining. There would never be a day where he could transcend. Chinyu's complexion changed. He could feel the terrifying aura erupting behind him, and he couldn't help but curse inwardly. This was a character that was about to become a demon king, so couldn't it be a little more broad-minded? Wouldn't it be better to just obediently die? I didn't dig up your family's ancestral grave, so why hold a grudge? Why must it drag him down with it? The current Chinyu didn't know what the nightmare bloodline flowing through his body meant. But there was one thing he knew, and that was that risking his life wasn't worth it. If he had to run, he had to run. He turned his head, his eyes turning pitch black. He glanced at the blood flame giant. Taking advantage of the moment, when it paused, Chinyu dodged the grasping hand. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, he opened up the distance once more. Originally, Chinyu was worried that the blood flame giant would attack Yunlan and force him to face it head-on, but reality proved that he was overthinking things. The blood flame giant seemed to hate him to the extreme. It vented all of its strength towards Chinyu, erupting with a terrifying strength with every move it made. If it weren't for the might of the abyss gaze interrupting him every time, Chinyu would have no other choice but to risk his life. Rumble, 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 the entire domain violently trembled. The fog that gathered around it began to collapse. It withstood the attacks from both inside and outside, accelerating the process of its destruction. Yunlan paled. Although she couldn't clearly see Chinyu's battle with the blood flame giant because of the fog, the wild strength that surged outwards undoubtedly indicated just what sort of perilous situation Qin was in right now. Although he was able to avoid the bombardment by a hair's breadth, it was like he was walking on the edge of a blade. He could lose his life at any moment. And all of this wasn't something he needed to bear. Regardless of what Qin was thinking, in the end, she still owed him a life. And the life she owed him today was different from the graciousness of saving her life in the past. She naturally couldn't help him from a safe distance. When death could arrive at any moment, she didn't hesitate to stand in front of him. Right now, Qin was that mountain that stood in front of her. Before that mountain collapsed, she wouldn't be harmed. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The tottering domain finally couldn't withstand the brutal ravaging and began to completely disintegrate. No, the blood flame giant emitted a shrill scream. It looked at Qin, who was rapidly retreating and hiding in the fog, its eyes filled with unwillingness and despair. The abyss gaze was an ability that only the King of Nightmares could control. But even the King of Nightmares couldn't continuously activate this heaven-defying ability. In this short period of time, how many times had Qin activated it? The blood flame giant didn't count, but it had to be at least 10 times. Each time, it thought that Qin had reached the end of his tether and that it was impossible for him to activate the strength of the abyss gaze once more. But even now, he was still alive and kicking without any signs of exhaustion. Instead, it was the domain that couldn't be maintained any longer and was broken apart. The domain was forcefully shattered, and the demon that tried to intercept him suffered a backlash. A mouthful of thick black blood spat out from his mouth. As he spat out this blood, it was like a balloon bursting. The aura of the demon that tried to intercept him began to rapidly fall. The raging blood flames around him rapidly extinguished and dissipated, revealing a withered corpse that had lost all luster. His death had arrived. Why was it like this? He was a dignified abyssal king, a tyrannical existence that stood at the highest peak, someone who had dominated for thousands of years without being defeated. Yet he had died today in such an inexplicable manner. It shouldn't be like this. He had his own reasons for accepting the task of suppressing cloud mist. Otherwise, with his status, there was no need for him to involve himself in the muddy waters of the struggle for the throne of the new King of Nightmares. There was no need to elaborate on the specifics, but since he chose to intervene, he should have made ample preparations. He had condensed the domain to seal off the aura. He had learned of the flaws in the carriage's defensive demonic runes ahead of time. He had the netherworld blood flame in his hands, a great killing tool that could erupt with strength, and in addition to his own incomparably formidable strength. Everything had been perfectly prepared. There shouldn't have been a problem, but a problem had occurred, slowly dragging him into a hopeless situation. Qin! It was this bastard. It was all because of him. Otherwise, Cloud Mist would have been captured by him long ago, and he wouldn't have been reduced to such a miserable state. The demon that tried to intercept him was withered and lifeless. His eyes were so dim that they nearly faded away, but at this moment they erupted with a final burst of light. He knew that he wouldn't survive. Even if Yunwia hadn't done anything, the netherworld blood flame would have exhausted all of his vitality. But he couldn't die like this. He had to drag Qin down with him. It was highly likely that he was the reincarnation of the King of Nightmares. Once others learned of this, he would die without a doubt. Within the nightmare race, those that forced him to take action would absolutely not allow the previous king to be reborn. Otherwise, they would all be destroyed. Qin is. The demon opened his mouth and roared out with the last of his strength. As long as his voice spread out, it would definitely be heard by others. At that time, Qin would absolutely die. With just a few words, he would be able to place Qin in a death trap. But just as the demon opened his mouth, not too far away, Qin figure appeared. His eyes turned pitch black, and his icy, cold gaze fell upon him. Again. Was this the abyssal gaze? Otherwise, how could a mere demon commander that hadn't even touched upon the threshold of Demon King be able to use it again and again? Even if he really was the reincarnation of the King of Nightmares, he still wouldn't be able to accomplish this. With a heart full of grievance, anger, and resentment, the demon took his last breath and fell to the ground. Qin Yu wiped away a cold sweat. Although he didn't know what this fellow was planning to say before he died, his intuition told him that if he didn't interrupt him, he would surely suffer. Luckily, his reaction was a step faster. This fellow had only spoken a single word. No one knew what was coming next. He pressed a hand against his chest, and strength gushed out. With a loud bang, Qin Yu cried out miserably as he was sent flying backwards. He smashed through the fog and crashed into Yunlan's side. Qin Yu, are you all right? Yunlan rushed over and hugged him. Cough, cough. As he coughed and spat out blood, Qin Yu smiled. As long as you're all right, his head lolled to the side as he fainted. He had no choice but to faint. That old thing Yunwuya had arrived. He wasn't as easily tricked as Yunlan. If he didn't faint now and was questioned a bit more, it would be troublesome if he revealed a flaw. Once he woke up and Yunwuya wanted to question him again, many of his traces would be gone, and it would be much easier for him to deal with them. Whoosh! There was the sound of breaking air as Yunwuya burst forth. His eyes swept around and his complexion changed. He lifted a hand and grasped forward. Space suddenly twisted, wrapping around Yunlan and Qin Yu. Then, without a word, he brought the two of them away. The 7 Kill clan elder's eyes flashed and his aura surged. He glanced at Marquis 15 June from the corner of his eyes. That person didn't move at all, as if he hadn't seen what was happening. The 7 Kill clan elder cursed inwardly. He took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to attack. Yunwuya didn't even glance at the already dead demon. The dead couldn't speak, so there was no need to waste any more time. Of course, things wouldn't end so easily. If this person dared to move against the old king's bloodline, no matter what their goal was, they would have to pay the appropriate price for their actions. Naturally, there would be people who would investigate everything that had happened today and deliver it to him. At that time, all of his bloodline and relatives would suffer the crazy eruption of the old king's bloodline and be turned to ashes in despair. Chapter 1114. In the blue tile courtyard, Yunlan's face was pale. She looked at Qin Yu, who was lying on the bed, her eyes filled with worry. When Yunwuya opened his eyes, she hurriedly asked, "Patriarch, how is he?" "He won't die," Yunwuya lightly said, but he couldn't help but frown. This boy had nearly been hammered to death. Not only was his flesh torn, but there were also dozens of broken bones. To demons with tyrannical bodies, this kind of injury was extremely serious. But for some reason, he felt that this injury was a bit strange. Moreover, this boy Qin Yu's vitality was shockingly vigorous. It didn't match the weakness he had displayed. Could he have been faking it? That couldn't be right. Although this boy had some skills, his strength couldn't be faked. In front of a top demon commander that could form a domain, it was only natural that he would be hammered to death. To say that he could still easily fake his injuries in a battle of this degree, Yunwuya really didn't believe it. Yunlan let out a breath, a happy expression on her face. That's good, that's good." Yunwuya's frown deepened. He glanced at her and said in a low voice, "Yunlan he knows?" Yunlan was startled. Then she slowly nodded. "Yes, Patriarch." Although neither of them said it explicitly, they both knew what he was referring to. Seeing Yunwuya's increasingly solemn expression, Yunlan hurriedly said, "Patriarch, Qin Yu should already know. Today, in the city lord's mansion, he helped me." She immediately recounted what had happened. "So, I believe that Qin Yu has no intention of harming the former king's bloodline. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to save me so many times. He could just watch from the sidelines." Yunwuya expressionlessly shook his head. "I admit that what you say is very reasonable. Perhaps Qin Yu has no intention of harming the former king's bloodline. But just because he doesn't now doesn't mean he won't in the future. The former king's bloodline is a matter of life and death. There can be no mistakes. So, even if he has saved you many times, I can only repay his kindness with enmity once. Bang! A trace of killing intent erupted from Qin Yu's body. The temperature in the air wildly dropped. A layer of white frost began to appear on Qin Yu's body. Patriarch! Yunlan's pale face was filled with anger. He stood in front of Qin Yu. I will not let you kill him. Yun Wuya roared with rage. Yunlan, get out of the way! I know that my actions are despicable, but for the safety of the entire race, I have no other choice. Yunlan shook his head. If clan elder wants to kill him, then kill me first. I definitely won't step aside. Yunlan! Yun Wuya was flustered and exasperated, his body shaking with rage. Don't force me, now that you know the secret of my race. Qin Yu cannot be allowed to live. Qin Yu was lying on the bed, his entire body covered in white frost. He was shrouded in a terrifying killing intent. He sighed inwardly. If he didn't know about it, then he really would have fallen for Cloudmist's trick. He thought to himself, if it weren't for the fact that you wholeheartedly wanted to push Cloudmist to me, then I really would have fallen for your trick. The reason was simple. After marriage, a bloodline was born. How could Qin Yu not know who he was sleeping with? It was impossible to hide such a thing. Therefore, Qin Yu would find out sooner or later. In today's situation, before Qin Yu had even boarded the carriage, he had already grasped the weakness of the old king's bloodline. This matter was certainly serious. If it was grasped by someone with ulterior motives, then the entire bloodline of the old king might be finished. But right now, Qin Yu wasn't jumping around in the open. He was in an unconscious state within the blue tile courtyard. In front of Yun Wuya, why would he need to be nervous? With this sly old fox's personality, his first thought was to lock Qin Yu up and use him as a breeding machine. Killing someone, that was far too wasteful. Moreover, taking 10,000 steps back, even if Yun Wuya really wanted to kill Qin Yu, there was no need for him to act so solemnly and with such great fanfare. He would also act as if he had no other choice and was shouting at Yunlan in front of him. In private, he had plenty of ways to quietly kill Qin Yu. Was there a need for him to fall out with Yunlan? So, everything in front of Qin Yu was an act. This sly old fox might not have been able to determine whether or not Qin Yu's injuries were real, but he had definitely discovered that Qin Yu had woken up. His current actions were deliberately done for Qin Yu to see. He wanted Qin Yu to know that although he had saved Yunlan's life, Yunlan had also saved him. Everyone was even. Don't think about using this favor to do anything. You had best be obedient. Otherwise, I'll deal with you however I want. Humph, humph. A sly old fox is a sly old fox. He won't suffer any losses at all. He's prepared for everything that he shouldn't have thought of. But why was I able to accurately guess his thoughts? Moreover, it was so clear and complete. Could it be that I'm also such a person? No, I'm definitely not. At most, I can be considered quick-witted, but I definitely wouldn't do something so shameless. Qin Yu cursed Yun Wuya inwardly. He groaned and slowly opened his eyes. Where am I? Yunlan fiercely turned around, a look of concern on his face. You're awake? Yun Wuya was expressionless. His eyes fell on Qin Yu, and as he looked at Yunlan's current expression, his lips couldn't help but twitch. Women were indeed women. They were a bit too emotional. They were normally fine, but once they encountered a man who barged into their hearts, their minds would become muddled. Humph, humph. Luckily, I, the wise and wise Yun Wuya, am here. No matter how crafty that brat Qin Yu is, he can forget about causing any trouble. Sir Yunlan. The patriarch is also here. It was I, Qin Yu, who was lacking in manners. As he spoke, he was about to bow, but his body trembled and his face paled even further. Yunlan said, "There is no need to be so polite. The patriarch will not care about such things." Yun Wuya put on a fake smile. He lightly said, "That's right. I indeed don't care about such trivial customs, but when it comes to the life or death of my family, I have no choice but to care. Qin Yu, I will kill you today. Do you have any complaints in your heart? Qin Yu cursed this old fart inwardly. This was forcing him to express his stance. It wasn't too much to say that he was biting the hand that fed him. Just you wait. I will remember this debt first. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely let you know just how fierce I am. But right now he was under the eaves of the patriarch, so he could only lower his head for now. Cough. Qin, you doesn't quite understand what the patriarch means. Yunwei rolled his eyes. What were you pretending to be so pure for? If you don't understand, you can wake up now. Since you've woken up, you should obediently acknowledge it. If you push me too far, I'll teach you a lesson. He faintly smiled and lightly said, You really don't know? Qin, you bitterly smiled. Yes, I inadvertently learned of Miss Yunlan's identity, but that was truly unintentional. Moreover, I have no intention of harming the old king's bloodline. Yun Wuya coldly sneered. There is no need to say such meaningless words. This is something that I played with in the past. In this world, only the dead can keep secrets. Patriarch. Yunlan's face flushed red with anger. As she looked at Qin Yu's incomparably weak appearance, she felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. He actually dared to act like this. I absolutely will not allow you to harm Qin Yu. Don't make me say this a third time. Yun Wuya coldly snorted, not speaking. He simply looked at Qin Yu as if to say, You brat. Hurry up and get on with it. You sly old bastard. If it weren't for the fact that we needed to enter the nightmare ancestral land, I would have already flipped out with you. Do you really think I'm easy to deal with? Do you understand the 10,000-foot Titan true body? If you don't understand, is that demon dragon race elder enough? Qin Yu clenched his teeth and coughed. A look of gratitude crossed his face. Thank you, Miss Yunlan, for protecting me. I am deeply grateful, and now Miss has also saved my life. Humph! That might not be true. Yun Wuya was secretly pleased with himself. This brat was tactful enough to take the initiative to repay his kindness. Then he felt a bit cold. This brat was actually able to guess his thoughts. His brain was also quite good. He couldn't be careless. Thinking of this, his eyes became increasingly cold. Qin Yu, looking at the fact that Yunlan risked her life to protect you, I can give you a way out. In this world, it is true that only the dead can keep secrets, but it is also true that we can barely trust our own people. If you marry Yunlan and become the son-in-law of my previous king's bloodline, then we will share weal and woe and benefit together. I will show you mercy and let this matter rest. Yunlan wanted to say something, but before he could open his mouth, Yun Wuya glared at him. Then he viciously glared at Qin Yu. Remember, this is my bottom line. If you dare to have any other thoughts, I guarantee I will tear you to shreds and then grind you into powder and toss you into the sewers, erasing all evidence. As he spoke, he turned and left. With a loud bang, the door slammed shut, leaving only Qin Yu and Yunlan in the room. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. Although Yunlan had brought up the matter of marriage before, he hadn't made it clear. There was still some degree of concealment between the two of them. But now that shameless old man Yunwei had used this opportunity to make it clear, the two of them stood face to face, so close that they could hear each other's breathing. It was hard not to feel awkward. Yunwei walked out of the courtyard and ordered people to seal off the surroundings. Not even a single mosquito was allowed to leave. A smug look appeared on his face. When he discovered that Yunlan's identity had been exposed, he had been shocked and enraged. His first thought was to silence him. But soon, someone as smart as old Yin, found a way to turn this crisis into an opportunity. Didn't Qin Yu want to refuse? In this sort of situation, why don't you try refusing me again? Do you really think my saber isn't sharp enough? But in order to give this boy more pressure, I might as well do something else first. I'll let him know just how powerful I, old Yin, am. A cold light flashed in Yun Wuya's eyes. He had attacked Yunlan again and again. If he didn't do something, then the old king's bloodline would become a joke. In truth, he had already begun to do something. It was just that the second interception had happened too quickly, and he hadn't been able to completely prepare yet. This time, he would settle old and new grudges together. It was time for some blood to flow in this evil peak city. The new king had ascended to the throne. How could there not be red embellishments in celebration? Shua! Yun Wuya's figure flickered and disappeared from sight. As for the safety of the blue tile courtyard, this was the residence of the dignified king of nightmares. If something could happen to Yunlan here, then the entire bloodline of the old king should just wash their necks clean and commit suicide. Outside the blue tile courtyard, beside a carriage, He Tiangong's complexion changed. His body tensed, like a drawn bow that could erupt with a heaven-shaking strike at any moment. Old Fox's reaction was far too slow. It was as if a giant stone had been placed on top of his head, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Luckily, the terrifying aura that enveloped the two only lasted for an extremely short period of time before fading away. Who? Old Fox let out a long breath, his face pale. Is that Yunwia? He Tiangang slowly nodded. That's right. This is a warning he gave us. Within his sleeves, his fists were tightly clenched together. He was also a peak demon commander who had touched upon the threshold of the King Realm. But the difference in strength between the two was far greater than he had imagined. Just now, when Yun Wuya had left the blue tile courtyard, his aura had locked onto the two of them. This was just a warning, but it was enough to force him into a stance of resisting with all his strength. This was the difference in strength. Old Fox could see the unwillingness in He Tiangong's eyes. He bitterly smiled inwardly. The old black dog still had some desire to resist, but under the suppression of that aura just now he could only tremble. Both of them were demon commanders. For the disparity in strength to be so great, it really hurt his pride. He took a deep breath and said, "What should we do?" He Tiangang was silent for a moment. He said, "Wait." Old Fox thought for a moment and then nodded. Qin Yu was in the blue tile courtyard. There was no doubt about this. For the time being, Yun Wuya didn't seem to have any ill intentions towards them. Of course, through the warning just now and the words Qin Yu had said before, he also knew that the relationship between the two sides wasn't as friendly as it seemed on the surface. But Qin Yu's strength absolutely wasn't limited to what he saw. As someone who carried a great destiny and shouldered the great cause of unifying the Dark Abyss, how could he be weak? Calmly waiting for the situation to change and waiting for an opportunity to strike was indeed the best choice for the two of them. Chapter 11:15. Qin Yu, who Old Fox and He Tiangang considered to be unfathomably deep and also had a powerful hidden card in his hand, was now staring with wide eyes, struggling with his emotions. Across from him, Yunlan restored her female form on her own initiative. Her limpid eyes fell on his face. Qin Yu, perhaps it's because our bloodlines are connected, or perhaps it's because you've saved me so many times, but I can't deny that I have a favorable impression of you. If you are willing to marry me, then even if I never imagined this day would come, I will still do my best to be a qualified wife. The entire bloodline of the old king will stand behind you and help you accomplish everything within the scope of our abilities. He had been confessed to, and it was by a princess with a noble status and an unimaginably beautiful appearance. Moreover, there was a strong promise attached to it. He looked at Yunlan in front of him. She was still dressed in men's clothes. Her back was loose and her hair hung down. But because of this, there was an indescribable attraction to her that caused Qin Yu's heart to beat faster and faster. A thought uncontrollably formed in his heart. If he agreed to her, all his problems would be easily solved. All he needed to pay was to unite with Yunlan in front of him. In this matter, no matter how he looked at it, he was the one who obtained the greatest advantage. Not only would he receive a free beauty, but he could also borrow the strength of the old king's bloodline to break through his current predicament. Qin Yu, Yunlan whispered. Her face was flushed red, and she gasped for breath, emitting a sweet fragrance. That's right, it was sweet. But in Qin Yu's eyes, this description wasn't enough. At this moment, Yunlan's aura was like a drug that he couldn't refuse. Qin Yu slowly looked up. His eyes began to turn blood red once more. As he looked at Yunlan's appearance, he pinched his thigh and barely managed to regain his sobriety. Yunlan, restrain your aura. You and I are impossible. You will naturally understand this in the future. The air fell silent. Yunlan stood up and drew back. She looked at Qin Yu, a dim light in her eyes. What do you want to say? Although he knew that his decision wasn't wrong, looking at her current appearance, Qin Yu still subconsciously felt a trace of guilt. With Yunlan's status, for her to say those words just now must have summoned up all of her courage. It was inevitable that she would be sad after being rejected by Qin Yu. But if I agree to your request, I'll be harming you. If you don't acknowledge your debt, you won't even have a place to cry when the time comes. He took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He thought to himself several times, I'm doing this for her good. I'm doing this for her good. He slowly said, Cloud Mist, I've already confirmed the patriarch's attitude. If I refuse the marriage, he absolutely won't let me off. So, I'm very grateful that you can think highly of me. If you really want to save me, then do as I suggest. Yunlan furrowed his brows and shook his head. I've said it before, the clan elder will never agree. Moreover, even if I agree to help you, how can you participate in the battle for the new king? I know that you have the bloodline of the nightmare race, but not all members of the nightmare race are qualified to fight for the throne. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. As long as she didn't blindly refuse him, that meant there was hope. As for the qualification restriction, it was only natural. He had already expected it. No matter what this restriction was, it was ultimately related to the demon race bloodline flowing in his body. The strength of the abyssal demon race was built upon their bloodline, so Qin Yu had absolute confidence in this. And the reason he possessed such great strength after entering the abyss was because he had seized the Nightmare King's bloodline from the myriad Soul Dao. How could such a person not have the qualifications to compete for the throne? Of course, there was still a possibility. After all, he came from the flesh and blood world and wasn't a pure abyssal creature. Even if he seized the Nightmare King's bloodline, that didn't mean everything would go smoothly. But if he didn't try, who knew what the result would be? Cloud Mist, I admit that what you said is correct. But since my bloodline can attract you, it shouldn't be too bad. You won't object to this, right? So I still have a chance. Qin Yu glanced at her and said in a low voice, Moreover, I am willing to vow to the will of the abyss that if the old king's bloodline supports me in competing for the throne, once I complete my wish, I will pass the throne to the person of the old king's bloodline. Yunlan's complexion changed. An oath to the will of the abyss had a tremendous binding force on all abyssal creatures. The stronger one was, the more clearly they could sense it. Once they violated it, they would have to withstand the punishment of the will of the abyss. No one dared to violate an oath to the will of the abyss. Since Qin Yu had such an attitude, he might be able to move the tribal elder. Yunlan's eyes flashed, and a thought appeared in her mind. She pursed her lips, not saying a word. Objection wasn't objection. Agreement wasn't agreement. In Qin Yu's eyes, this silence clearly contained some other meaning. He furrowed his eyebrows. He looked at Yunlan, not too far away, and bitterly smiled inwardly. It seemed this woman really had taken a liking to him. No matter, he had to calm her down first. At worst, he would just have to eat his words. In any case, if things didn't go smoothly, there was a high chance he would fall out with the old king's bloodline. It didn't matter if he hated them a bit more or less. With this thought in mind, Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He shook his head and said, Fine, I will promise you one more thing. If it is finally proven that I have no way to participate in the struggle for the throne, Then I will agree to tribal elders' request. Yun Lan's eyes brightened. She looked up at Qin Yu. Are you serious? This straightforward and direct response left Qin Yu speechless. Indeed, his guess wasn't wrong. This woman had deliberately waited here for him to say these words. As the dignified nightmare princess, couldn't she be a bit more reserved? Although Qin Yu ridiculed her in his heart, he didn't want to complicate matters further. He nodded and said, Of course. Yun Lan brightly smiled. Then it settled. She looked at Qin Yu, her eyes soft and gentle, as if she were looking at a piece of meat that had been cooked in her own pot. She was brimming with confidence. This look left Qin Yu feeling uncomfortable. He thought to himself, could it be that the requirements to compete for the throne were really that high? Otherwise, Yun Lan wouldn't have revealed such an expression. But with things having come this far, even if he knew he had been tricked by Yun Lan, he could only brace himself and accept it. Moreover, Qin Yu felt that it was still unknown what the final result would be. He would have to let this woman be happy for a while. You should have thought about it. The competition for the new king has strict requirements towards bloodline. Blue Tile Courtyard has a method to appraise it, but it will take time to prepare. Yun Lan thought for a moment. The patriarch must have run off to settle accounts with someone right now, but he won't be too patient. At most, he will give you 1 or 2 days to consider it. Tomorrow, I will do my best to prepare everything. Do you have any questions? Qin Yu waved his hand. Tomorrow. In fact, he didn't have any problems doing so right now. But first, Yun Lan needed time to prepare, and second, he was currently in a severely wounded state. If he were to immediately climb up and jump around, wouldn't that mean that Yun Lan's intelligence needed to be recharged? But what he feared was Yun Lan didn't linger. Rest well. Don't worry. I won't play any tricks in this matter. Moreover, it's impossible for me to do anything. When the time comes, you will naturally understand. After speaking, she glanced at Qin Yu and turned to leave. This glance left Qin Yu a bit embarrassed, because this was indeed what he was thinking just now. This woman, she wasn't too stupid after all. The door closed. Qin Yu swept out with his divine sense. After determining that there was no one watching him, he smiled. Everything would have to wait until tomorrow, as long as he performed well enough. That sly old fox Yunwia shouldn't have any reason to refuse. After all, he had already agreed to pass the throne to the old king's bloodline. No matter how he looked at it, they wouldn't suffer a loss. Of course, all of this was built on a positive foundation. If Yun Wuya stubbornly insisted, humph, then he would have no choice but to fall out with him. Stick and carrot, one in each hand. Let's see how this old fellow chooses. Did he really think that he was a dish on the plate of the old king's bloodline that they could knead as they pleased? If it weren't for the fact that he had too many misgivings and didn't want to cause too much of a ruckus, would he really have summoned the demon dragon elder to understand him? Thinking of this, Qin Yu sighed. That woman Liao Shi, even though she had left, she still had a way to make him miss her. After all, if it weren't for her, the dignified demon dragon elder wouldn't have even looked at him. This was a debt of gratitude, and a debt of gratitude was often the hardest to repay. Qin Yu shook his head and suppressed these thoughts. He would think about Liao Shi's favor later. Right now, the most important thing was to show strength that the old king's bloodline valued. So, he was prepared to do everything he could tomorrow. People began to die in underground Crest City. There were many of them, and a wide range was involved. The City Lord Mansion, the Ancient King, the new faction. There were even some unremarkable people that died in this storm. Although all of this was done in secret, there were far too many people that died. Moreover, some of them weren't ordinary people. Thus, in underground Crest City, regardless of their status or cultivation, everyone soon learned of this matter. They also understood that the revenge of the old king's bloodline had finally arrived. No one dared to underestimate a powerful family that had once given birth to a nightmare king. But this time, the actions of the old king's bloodline had deeply grasped the essence of fast, accurate, and ruthless. The terrifying strength they revealed left everyone's heart shaking. Everyone was silent. Those that were killed were naturally killed for a reason that deserved to die. The old king's bloodline hadn't broken through their bottom line, and they didn't want to jump out and become the target of the old king's bloodline. Thus, maintaining their silence was the best choice. Thus, the people of underground Crest City that was shrouded in a blood-red hue was in a state of silence. Yunlan didn't interfere in these matters. But when Yun Wuya returned to the blue tile courtyard and she went to greet him, she could see a deep weariness on his face. Even someone as powerful as the patriarch found it difficult to deal with these matters. It could even be said that he was withstanding an unimaginable pressure. The slightest mistake could incite a war between giants. This caused Yunlan to feel a bit guilty. At this time, she wasn't able to stand by the patriarch's side. Instead, she had to propose something that would make things difficult for him. Hesitation rose in her heart. Yunlan couldn't bring herself to say the words that were at the tip of her tongue. Yun Wuya drank some tea and leaned back in his chair. He let out a long breath and smiled. Our fearless Miss Yunlan even dared to stop me from killing people. What's wrong with you now? What's the matter? Speak. Yunlan felt increasingly guilty, but she had already promised Qin Yu. If she went back on her word, he would definitely be dissatisfied. She took a deep breath and bowed. Patriarch, there is indeed something I must tell you. It involves Qin Yu, and it is a bit presumptuous. Please listen to me first, and don't be too angry. That's right. Yunlan had to explain Qin Yu's proposal to Yun Wuya. In truth, she hadn't planned to hide anything from him from the very start. As the patriarch of the old king's bloodline, Yun Wuya had racked his brains for the entire family. He had the qualifications to know anything that involved the future of the family. Even if this was only an attempt with an extremely low probability of success, Yun Wuya frowned. What does this boy want to do? Tell him to stop playing tricks with me. Otherwise, I will slap him to death with a single palm. Yunlan bitterly smiled. She hadn't even said anything, and the patriarch seemed to be angry. Whatever, she would have to let the patriarch make the decision. She didn't delay any further. She repeated the proposal that Qin Yu had spoken to her at the city Lord Mansion's banquet, concealing nothing. As she thought, when Yun Wuya heard that Qin Yu hoped that the old king's bloodline would support him in his struggle for the throne, he laughed in anger. However, this sly old fox wasn't stupid. Although he was angry, he didn't lose his reasoning. Afterwards, although his complexion wasn't too good, he still managed to compose himself. He leaned back in his chair and fell into deep thought. Yunlan looked at his complexion and said, Patriarch, the situation is like this, although I don't know why Qin Yu insists on not marrying with me. I can sense that he is resolutely opposed to this. If you force him, there will definitely be a problem. A problem? Yun Wuya sneered again and again. What problem can there be? Do you think this boy can escape from my grasp? If he dares to argue with me, I will immediately teach him why flowers are red. Yunlan said, of course. Patriarch, if you personally take action, you can easily suppress Qin Yu. How could he dare to be insolent in front of you? That is why he told me this first. Humph. It is still my daughter who understands reason. Qin Yu does have some tricks up his sleeve, but in front of me, they aren't worth mentioning at all. Yun Wuya's complexion became much better. He rapped a hand on the table and said, I understand what you mean. You are afraid that this boy will act rashly and cause a ruckus beyond repair. Doesn't he want to try? Then let him be tested. Once this boy gives up, he will naturally be obedient. Otherwise, he glanced at Yunlan. At that time, if this boy dares to go back on his word, you cannot stop me from doing anything. Yunlan had a light expression and his tone was soft. Of course, what I hate the most is others deceiving me. If Qin Yu still doesn't agree, then Patriarch can punish him however he wants. I will not interfere. Yun Wuya coldly sneered. Then go and prepare. I also want to see just how much weight this boy has that he dares to make such a request. Yun Lan respectfully bowed and left. In his room, Qin Yu was resting with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a trace of fear rose in his heart. He opened his eyes and muttered, "Who is talking about me again?" Chapter 11:16. Within the nightmare race, the ancient king's bloodline was the most powerful. This was a publicly acknowledged fact. Therefore, when it was confirmed that the previous king had completely disappeared, the ancient king's bloodline rose in status and became the most favored faction. Under such circumstances, giving face to the ancient king's bloodline, and even secretly providing them with assistance, was a safe investment. They did not need to be able to obtain as many benefits as possible after the ancient king regained the throne. It was best if they could maintain their current status. After the new king ascended the throne, the nightmare race was bound to undergo a major reshuffle. Everyone knew this. Maintaining their status was already very rare. No one knew how many people within the nightmare race had provided convenience to the ancient king's bloodline. But there was no doubt that this would be a very powerful force, so powerful that even the former king's bloodline strength, and that they were in Erfing City, would still be repeatedly schemed against. That was why there had been the assassination in the 9 Underworld Tower, the incident at the city Lord's Banquet, and the interception by a domain realm expert. That's right, attacking Yunlan and trying to beat the former king's bloodline into a quagmire was the ancient king's doing. Strictly speaking, this was not a secret within the nightmare race. It was just that there was no evidence. Of course, this kind of thing did not need evidence. It was up to one's own judgment. Everyone knew who had acted, but the former king's bloodline was weak, and they did not have a weakness, so they could only endure. That's right, the former king's bloodline was enduring, even though Yunwea had flipped out at the clan elders' meeting and cursed them for being old and undying. Then he had gone on a killing spree and killed many people. But compared to the ancient king's bloodline, the former king's bloodline's counterattack was not even worth mentioning. It had to be known that if anything happened to Yunlan, the former king's bloodline would be completely destroyed. It was clear at a glance which was more important. But this did not mean that the ancient king's bloodline had the people's hearts in their hands and could do whatever they wanted. They could do it once, twice, or thrice, but they had failed to take down Yunlan and deal a heavy blow to the former king's bloodline 3 times in a row. This in itself was a significant blow to the ancient king's bloodline. People could not help but think that perhaps they had overestimated the ancient king's bloodline strength. Or perhaps the old king's bloodline was blessed with luck. That's right, he was just lucky. Apart from this, they couldn't figure out how Yunlan was able to avoid the killing blow 3 times in a row. But regardless of whether they could understand it or not, they had to be cautious. Wasn't it too risky to blindly bet on the bloodline of the ancient king? No one expressed their opinion, but the atmosphere in the silent, dark hill city began to quietly change. The 7 Kill clan elder's face was livid. He slammed the back of his chair, causing it to instantly shatter. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Bastard! Do these people dare to betray the bloodline of the ancient king?" His aura abruptly erupted, and a tyrannical aura swept out. The hearts of many demons in the hall shivered, and they hurriedly lowered their heads. Marquis Qianjun looked at him calmly and said, "Don't be angry, Elder Chisha. You and I have failed 3 times, so it is expected that their attitude will change." Humph! The 7 Kill clan elder coldly sneered. What a bunch of fence-sitters. They want to protect their own interests after the ancient king's bloodline gains power, but they are unwilling to contribute. How can there be such a good thing in this world? As he spoke, his eyes swept across the people in the hall. You are all trusted aides of the old king's bloodline, so you are different from those people. If I learn that any of you dare to betray me, I will not forgive you. Clan elder, don't worry, we would never dare. We swear our loyalty to the ancient king. Anyone who dares to betray us will be torn to pieces." The demons in the hall all stood up, their expressions filled with righteous indignation and loyalty. Marquis Qianjun saw all of this and smiled inwardly. This was only on the surface. It didn't mean anything at all. Of course, it wasn't to say that they had any thoughts of betrayal, because the ancient king's bloodline still held the absolute advantage. But if the situation was reversed, the speed at which these people in the hall changed their attitudes would be faster and more resolute than they were now. This was because the deeper the entanglement of interests, the more one needed to take a clearer stance in order to protect themselves. This was a simple truth. You are all the most loyal subordinates of the ancient king's bloodline. The Seven Kill Clan elder has no intention of doubting you. This is just a reminder. The nightmare beast hunt will begin soon. Go according to the original plan. As for the old king's bloodline, we will temporarily put this matter aside. It won't be too late to settle the score with them after we take the throne. The Seven Kill Clan elder frowned but didn't say anything. The people in the hall respectfully bowed and left. Once these people left, the Seven Kill Clan elder said in a low voice, "Marquis Qianjun, are we really going to let this go? We have already obtained crucial information. If we can verify it, the old king's bloodline will collapse and the new king's throne will be in our hands." Marquis Qianjun sighed. "How can I accept this? But with the current situation, the ancient king's bloodline's actions have already caused dissatisfaction in the Council of Elders. Continuing to act is not a good choice." Seeing the Seven Kill Clan elder's unwilling expression, he said, "Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. Elder Seven Kill should know that stopping now doesn't mean we won't. After all, in the process of becoming king, all sorts of accidents can happen." "Who?" The Seven Kill Clan elder let out a breath. "Good, consider them lucky. When the battle for the throne begins, we will settle the score. That old bastard Yunwei had killed many people, and several important people under him had died. But at this time, in order to appease the dissatisfaction of the Council of Elders, he couldn't act rashly. He was already furious. Once the ancient king's bloodline took back the throne, he would let this old thing know how stupid it was to be his enemy." Marquis Qianjun stood up and left. Without any movement, his figure flickered and disappeared. Watching him leave, the Seven Kill Clan elder's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Not only was Marquis Qianjun a powerful person, but he also had an incomparably powerful force behind him. Although he had a close relationship with the ancient king's bloodline, he always gave the Seven Kill Clan elder a feeling of uncertainty and unpredictability. This person's thoughts might not be so simple. I must keep a close eye on this person. If anything goes wrong, I will immediately report to the clan elder. Other than the Azure Tile Courtyard in Erfing City, the ancient king's bloodline also had their own temporary residence, called East Willow. After Marquis Qianjun left the East Flow courtyard and boarded the carriage, he looked back with a trace of mockery in his eyes. The Seven Kill Clan elder seemed rash, but he was actually quite smart. He actually suspected Marquis Qianjun, but without evidence. So what if he was from the ancient king's bloodline? His position as Marquis Qianjun was recognized by the Abyss. Even the King of Nightmares couldn't touch him. "Let's go." The carriage quietly moved forward. Marquis Qianjun slowly closed his eyes and his aura gradually calmed down. At this moment, the gems embedded in the walls of the carriage lit up one by one and shone down, enveloping his figure. Under the light, his aura was isolated and the outside world could no longer sense him. Swish! Marquis Qianjun suddenly opened his eyes and pointed at his forehead. In the next moment, the figure stepped out of his body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The city lord's residence. Blue Ocean's eyes flashed. He waved his hand to interrupt Chung Hai's report. "I have something to deal with. Go guard the study and don't let anyone disturb me." Chung Hai respectfully complied, turned around, pushed open the door, and left. When the study door closed, the space in front of Blue Ocean flickered and a phantom appeared. Marquis Qianjun? He frowned, his face dark. Why have you come to the city, Lord's residence, in this situation? If someone notices, both you and I will be in big trouble. Marquis Qianjun's phantom smiled. Since this Marquis dared to come, I'm naturally not afraid of being discovered. Does the city lord think that this Marquis would act rashly? Humph. Blue Ocean coldly snorted. He didn't say anything more. What business do you have here? Marquis Qianjun lightly said. I came to tell the city lord that the ancient king's bloodline won't be making any more moves and will instead focus on preparing for the nightmare beast hunt. After all, this concerns the new king's throne and is of utmost importance. Blue Ocean was expressionless. I'm not interested in this, Marquis Qianjun said. Perhaps this Marquis is being meddlesome, but does the city lord really not want to know who will be following His Highness Qinghuan into the nightmare beast domain? He lifted a hand and took out a jade slip. The list of names is inside. Unfortunately, the city lord's arrangements aren't included. After speaking, Marquis Qianjun's phantom revealed a faint smile. He turned and vanished from sight. Looking at the jade slip on the table, Blue Ocean remained expressionless. But there were subtle changes in his expression, indicating that he didn't truly care. The struggle for the new Nightmare King. The old king, the ancient king, and the new factions, 3 big shots, had all gathered at Dark Peak City. But this didn't mean that they were the only ones interested in the throne. In truth, there were many people who were interested. It was just that most of them didn't dare to reveal it. Or perhaps they were still hiding underwater, waiting for a suitable opportunity. Blue Ocean took the jade slip. When Yunlan pushed open the door and entered, Qin Yu was already prepared. Of course, he didn't appear to be 100 times more energetic than before. His complexion was still a bit pale, but this recovery speed left Yunlan surprised. She swept her eyes over him several times, hesitating as if she wanted to say something. It seemed that this woman also suspected that Qin Yu's realistic performance yesterday had been deliberately shown to her. Cough. Qin Yu didn't give her time to think. He stood up and said, In order to prepare for today's test, I used some secret techniques to rapidly recover from my injuries. As he thought, Yunlan's attention was immediately diverted. Secret techniques? Are you all right? She naturally knew of methods that could accelerate the recovery of injuries in a short period of time. Among them, the more powerful ones could even allow a demon to directly restore themselves to their peak state or even stronger. But without a doubt, this sort of perfect state could only be maintained for a period of time, and one had to pay an extremely heavy price to do so. Qin Yu shook his head. I'm fine. It's just that I'll be weak for a little longer. Let's not delay any further and leave now. Yunlan thought that he was worried that the secret technique couldn't be maintained for too long. She nodded and didn't say anything more. Follow me. Chapter 11:17. Before they began to test Qin Yu's bloodline, there was a small interlude. A group of demons were escorted away, all of them looking as if they had lost their parents and their faces were filled with despair. Seeing this, Qin Yu's lips twitched. He looked up at Yunlan and discovered a bit of unnaturalness on her face, as he thought this was most likely that old thing Yunhui's methods. Was he trying to scare him? Otherwise, why would Blue Tile Courtyard clean up its internal affairs in front of him? This was a clear warning to him not to play any more tricks. Did you see that? These people are your fate. Qin Yu lightly coughed and asked, They are? Yunlan composed herself. She revealed a complex expression. The carriage that the patriarch refined for me had its defensive runes broken. They are all people that were implicated. The life-saving item that Yunhuia gave Yunlan hadn't played its role. If they were implicated in this matter, their fates could be imagined. Qin Yu's eyebrows arched up. To discover the problem so quickly, that old thing Yun Wuya's control over Blue Tile Courtyard was truly astonishing. But if he had a darker thought, who knew whether or not this old thing had already noticed the actions of these people and was just pretending not to know? Of course, these were just random thoughts. If Yun Wuya really wanted to harm Yunlan, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. We're here, Yunlan said. She pointed a finger at the main hall. Enter and release your bloodline aura with all your strength to begin the test. The main hall was nameless, and it wasn't too large. It looked ordinary from the outside, but Qin, you could feel a bit of pressure from it. This pressure faintly came from the abyssal bloodline he inherited. As he thought, the so-called test was related to his bloodline. Qin Yu nodded, not saying anything else. He walked to the front of the main hall. He pushed forward, and the doors opened. Without hesitation, he stepped inside. The doors closed behind him, and his surroundings fell into absolute darkness, as if all light was isolated. Not even divine sense could sense him. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to attack. The old king's bloodline shouldn't harm him, and as he thought, besides the darkness in front of him, he didn't sense anything wrong. The darkness was incomparably quiet. All Qin you could hear was his own breathing. And then, was that it? Qin Yu revealed a helpless expression. Today's test was whether or not he had the qualifications to participate in the struggle for the position of the Nightmare King. Couldn't it be a little more solemn and ceremonial? Just like that, he didn't even have time to react. Cough, forget it. It's like this anyway. Qin Yu took a deep breath. The ancient's heart in his chest began to beat faster. It contracted and expanded, releasing a formidable strength that accelerated the circulation of his blood. The pitch-black darkness was endless, without the least bit of light. After Qin Yu released his bloodline aura, it seemed to be activated, erupting with a formidable pressure. It came from all directions, wrapping around him. It was like a membrane that could be clearly sensed, wanting to cover him completely. A sense of crisis rose up in his heart. He didn't know what this pressure was, but he had a bad premonition. He absolutely could not allow this pressure to completely suppress him. Without needing an explanation, Qin Yu already knew the contents of today's bloodline test. The longer one resisted the pressure of the darkness, the higher the score would be. Once one's aura was completely suppressed, the test would end. Open for me. Qin Yu roared inwardly. The aura he released rose, directly smashing apart the pressure of the darkness. But good times didn't last long. Before Qin Yu could relax, the pressure of the darkness swept towards him once more, and this time it was even stronger than before. Humph! Qin Yu stuffily coughed. Blood vessels bulged out beneath his skin, and he bitterly smiled. He felt that he had underestimated the requirements of the nightmare race for the qualifications to compete for the throne. With the current situation, he feared he wouldn't be able to last much longer. This was troublesome. If he couldn't pass the test, he had no other choice but to fall out with the old king's bloodline. But if he really reached this step, it wouldn't be difficult to retreat unscathed. But if he wanted to enter the nightmare ancestral land again, that would be infinitely more difficult. As Qin Yu bitterly smiled and his heart was filled with anxiety, Yun Wuya had already arrived outside the nameless temple. His eyes widened. He looked at the demonic runes that had appeared on the surface of the temple, his face full of shock. This is Qin Yu? Just as he finished speaking, he realized that this was nonsense. He immediately asked, "When did he go in?" Yun Lan's expression was even more shocked than his own. Her lips moved, and she said with difficulty, "He just went in." Yun Wuya anxiously stomped his feet. "How long was it just now? I want the exact time." Yun Lan took a deep breath. At most 10 breaths of time. As soon as he went in, the runes engraved on the temple were activated. She looked in front of her. As the runes on the surface of the temple began to emit fluctuations, Space began to shake. Ripples spread outwards, twisting and distorting until it was completely isolated from the outside world. Now, this ancestral temple was still within the blue tile courtyard, but a formidable barrier had appeared between it and the ancestral land. This was the self-stimulation of the ancestral land's strength. Only someone with a sufficiently powerful nightmare bloodline could trigger such a change. Or, to be more precise, the stimulation of the ancestral land's strength proved that Qin Yu did indeed have the qualifications to compete for the throne. But the time wasn't right. Yunlan clearly remembered that when she secretly participated in the test in the past, it took almost an hour. When she couldn't hold on any longer, runes began to appear in the temple, galvanizing the strength of the ancestral land. Even like this, the clan elders were overjoyed. They called her a rare genius of the Nightmare Clan. This was because, according to the clan's records, anyone that could cause the strength of the ancestral land to shake within an hour had the qualifications to participate in the struggle for the throne. An hour, this was already one of the best results in the Nightmare Clan's records. But now, Qin Yu had only used several breaths of time, and this didn't include the time he was delayed when he suddenly fell into darkness. If one carefully calculated the time, it was definitely less than they had imagined. What did this mean? As Yunlan's heart was shaking beside her, Yunhui's face was cloudy and filled with disbelief. He stubbornly stared at the shining demonic runes in front of him. He whispered to himself, "Impossible! How is this possible?" But besides what he thought of, what other possibility could there be in such a short period of time? In such a short period of time, the strength of the ancestral land had been aroused? Yunhui took a deep breath and suppressed his shocked thoughts. As he looked at the temple, his eyes became incomparably bright. Whether or not Qin Yu was the one he thought he was, there was no doubt that he had displayed sufficient qualifications. If the old king's bloodline agreed to Qin Yu's previous proposal and fully supported him at this moment, Yunhui couldn't help but gulp. His throat felt dry. "Steady, steady. Don't panic. Take a closer look." This matter was far too important. There absolutely could not be any mistakes. At this time, the demonic runes on the surface of the temple began to shine even brighter, becoming a bit blinding. A suppressive aura was released from the temple. Yunhui and Yunlan's complexions changed, and they subconsciously drew back. "Kacha! Kacha!" A shattering sound rang out in their ears. Yunhui's eyes widened as he watched the runes on the surface of the temple begin to shatter. This is bad. His heart skipped a beat. He stepped forwards and pressed his hand down. Bang! A powerful strength instantly arrived, covering the entire temple and suppressing the incomparably powerful aura that erupted from it. The speed at which the runes were breaking slowed down, but it didn't truly stop. With more and more light cracking sounds, Yunhui's complexion became increasingly ugly. Bang! With a loud explosion, he was sent flying backwards. Without the suppression of his strength, the runes on the surface of the temple began to wildly shatter. In the blink of an eye, all of them vanished. The strength that erupted from within the temple could no longer be hidden. It erupted into the void like a volcano. The powerful barrier formed by the distortion of space violently shook. Pitch-black cracks began to appear. Yunhui spat out a mouthful of blood. He bitterly smiled and looked at Yunlan. "I fear there will be trouble this time." His figure flickered. He passed through the space barrier and appeared above the blue tile courtyard. In the next moment, his body stiffened and the bitter smile on his face deepened. As he thought the situation he worried about the most had occurred. A series of illusionary images appeared in the air, consisting of countless enormous palaces stacked on top of one another, emitting an ancient aura. It was as if they had existed for endless years and would continue to exist until the end of the world. The entire Evil Peaks city fell deathly silent. All the demons couldn't help but widen their eyes as they looked at the phantom that appeared in the skies above the city. This is, although no one had seen it with their own eyes, such a grand and ancient aura the powerful pressure it released, and it was within Evil Peak City. Then there was only one possibility, the Nightmare Ancestral Land. This was the Nightmare Ancestral Land that only existed in legends. The reason it was described as legends was because besides the Nightmare King, no one had ever entered. In fact, even powerful elders like Yun Wuya and Seven Kills had never taken a single step into the Nightmare Ancestral Land. It existed here, but no one could see it. It represented endless mysteries and an inconceivably formidable strength. It was truly mysterious and also truly formidable. Looking at the endless abyss, the Nightmare Ancestral Land could absolutely be ranked amongst the highest. It was very simple. Any member of the Nightmare clan that obtained recognition, no matter how strong or weak they were before entering, would be able to transform into an incomparably powerful Demon King after returning from the Ancestral Land. They would become a true Nightmare King. They would become a powerful existence that stood at the peak of the abyss in a single step. This sort of almost heaven-defying ability to change fate and create supreme experts could not be described with just the word inconceivable. Today, it was the first and only time it truly appeared before everyone's eyes. At this moment, the shock in the hearts of the demons in Evil Peak City could be imagined. But when these turbulent waves of emotions began to subside and calm, they slowly recovered their wits. Why had the Nightmare Ancestral Land appeared? Countless eyes gathered below the phantom of the Ancestral Land. That position seemed to be the location of the Blue Tile Courtyard. Could this matter be related to them? In the East Flow Courtyard, the Seven Kills clan elder frowned, his eyes filled with shock. Although he had never seen the Ancestral Land with his own eyes, the invisible pressure that came from his bloodline level was clearly telling him that this was the projection of the Nightmare Ancestral Land. And the reason why the projection had descended was because a powerful enough force had appeared in the Blue Tile Courtyard, one that could trigger the reaction of the Ancestral Land. What was this strength? The Seven Kills clan elder wasn't sure. But no matter what the truth was, this wasn't good news for the ancient king bloodline. How hateful! That old bastard Yunwuya. Just what tricks was he playing? The Seven Kills clan elder's eyes darkened. He stepped forwards, twisting space and appearing outside the Blue Tile Courtyard. He had to confirm this. Bang! Just as the Seven Kills clan elder appeared, the space in front of him exploded. Pitch-black cracks appeared, emitting a powerful tearing strength. His complexion paled and he angrily roared, "Yun Wuya, do you want to attack me?" Across from him, Yun Wuya slowly drew back his fist. He glanced at the Seven Kills clan elder's incomparably angry face and lightly said, "I am only reminding you that this is the former king's palace. Recklessly intruding is the greatest disrespect to the former king. My former king bloodline will definitely pursue this matter to the end." The Seven Kills clan elder's face twitched with anger. "Do you think I don't know what you are saying? Can't you see that I am still some distance away from the Blue Tile Courtyard?" This old bastard was deliberately trying to find fault with me. Yun Wuya looked at him with contempt. "That's right. I am trying to find fault with you. What can you do about it?" He slowly swept his eyes around. Outside the Blue Tile Courtyard, there were many people gathered in the shadows and in the light. They had all been attracted here by the phantom of the Ancestral Land. Only by choosing the fiercest location could he deter these people so that they wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Yun Wuya was well aware that Qin Yu's existence absolutely could not be exposed. Otherwise, no one could save him, even if he really was the reincarnation of the former king. That's right, in Yun Wuya's eyes, Qin Yu was the reincarnation of the previous Nightmare King. This was the only possibility that could explain why he was able to easily galvanize the strength of the Ancestral Land and why the phantom of the Ancestral Land had appeared in the skies above Evil Peak City. Even if he hadn't confirmed this, everything he knew was enough for Yun Wuya to protect him at all costs. What nonsense! If Qin Yu really was the reincarnation of the former king, then he would be the same as the ancestor of the former king's bloodline. How could he not save him? Take a step back. Even if he wasn't with Qin Yu's bloodline, seizing the throne would be far too easy. This was a trump card. Once it was used well, the entire bloodline of the former king would rise once more. The 7-kill tribe elder nearly exploded with rage. But even if his heart ached, he still decided to endure it. He couldn't be led astray by this old thing, Yunwia. He couldn't fight right now, so he had to first determine what the former king's bloodline had done. None of them were fools. Yunwia's current actions were definitely to hide something that he didn't want them to know about. At this time, the eyes of the demons lit up. As they looked at the blue tile courtyard, they were like hungry wolves that had seen food, their eyes shining with a bright green light. Humph! Yunwia coldly snorted. He icily said, "Everyone, I know that you are curious, but no matter how curious you are, I will not allow anyone to spy on the blue tile courtyard. To disrespect the former king is a great crime. Before you do anything, you had best think this through." Cough, Patriarch, you are overthinking things. We are only worried that the phantom of the ancestral land will appear and be used by those with evil intentions. How could we dare to recklessly investigate the courtyard? A demon coughed and smiled. But, as I said just now, the ancestral land is not only related to the former king's bloodline, but also the foundation of my nightmare race. Since something like this happened today, shouldn't Patriarch allow us to determine whether or not it will be detrimental to the ancestral land? Can't you sense whether or not it will be detrimental? This projection is only caused by the ancestral land's strength being released. It will soon disappear, Yunwia said without expression. Even so, if we can't determine what it is, our hearts will always be restless. My words are proof. Do you dare to not believe me? Yunwia's eyes flashed with an ominous light. It wasn't that they didn't believe him, but that they dared to not believe him. That one extra word was more domineering than the last. The demon powerhouse that spoke was so angry that his nose nearly went crooked. He thought that Yunwia was a patriarch of the former king's bloodline, and his status was indeed higher than his own, and he was also a bit stronger than him. But just this alone wasn't enough for him to be so rude to him. The smile on his face froze. He clenched his teeth and finally lowered his head. If he had to admit defeat, then he had to admit defeat. At this time, standing out like a bird wasn't a good choice. Everyone wanted to know. Everyone had cat claws in their hearts. So why should they be used as knives by others? Shua, Marquis Qianjuan's figure appeared. He glanced at the phantom of the nightmare ancestral land that floated in the skies above the blue tile courtyard, a dignified look in his eyes. Then his eyes fell on Yunwia. This sly old fox sensed something and glared at him, a look that said, "If you dare to say anything else, I won't forgive you." Marquis Qianjun bitterly smiled. He cupped his hands together and took a step back, indicating that he had no ill intentions. He certainly wanted to know what was happening in the blue tile courtyard. But there was definitely someone who was even more anxious than he was. It was best to do as little as possible to offend others. That's right, he was talking about the 7-kill patriarchs. Or, to be more precise, he was talking about the ancient king's bloodline. Although Evil Peak City was relatively calm, there was no doubt that the bloodline of the former king and the bloodline of the ancient king were only a step away from tearing apart all pretense of cordiality. The ancient king's bloodline that held the advantage couldn't possibly watch on helplessly as the suppressed bloodline of the former king obtained a chance to turn things around. Otherwise, their fates would be miserable. Although causing the projection of the ancestral land to descend didn't necessarily mean anything, even if there was only a 1% chance, it still couldn't be ignored. The 7-kill patriarch coldly glared at Marquis Qianjun. This fellow was very shrewd. He definitely wouldn't take the initiative. Feeling the gazes of the people around him, the 7-kill patriarch cursed inwardly. Even though he knew he was being used, he could only brace himself. Taking a deep breath, his eyes fell on several people in the crowd. The demons that he had his eyes on all cursed inwardly. Why did they have to run so fast for no reason? Now, this was going to be fun, but they couldn't refuse. The only reason they had their current status was because of the support of the ancient king's bloodline. If they didn't take the initiative today, they wouldn't need a cumbersome organ like the head in the future. Patriarch Yunwuya, the ancestral land concerns the foundation of our race. No matter how noble your status is, you cannot suppress this matter for your own selfish desires. A demon said through clenched teeth, his tone sharp. We have the right to know what you have done. Someone fired the first shot, and the next few people charged forward one after another. That's right, that's right. Patriarch is strong, but don't think you can suppress us just because of this. We have the right to know. The blue tile courtyard must give us an explanation for triggering the ancestral land. Patriarch Yunwuya, please step aside. The crowd was immediately riled up. Yunwuya sneered and suddenly punched out. Terrifying demonic energy exploded in the air like a tsunami. Amidst a series of muffled sounds, the few demons who had spoken up for justice were sent flying with miserable screams. One by one, their bodies shattered in midair, and blood sprayed out like it was free. It was truly a miserable sight. The 7-kill patriarch was dumbfounded. He really didn't think that this old bastard Yunwuya would dare to attack in this situation. He was crazy. Bastard, what are you doing? Yunwuya glanced at him and chose to ignore him. He sneered, the right to know? What right do you have to know? This old man is being unreasonable. What can you do about it? As he spoke, he took another step forward, and a violent aura swept out. Whoever wants to invade the blue tile courtyard, step forward. This old man will take you all on. On the surface, he seemed incomparably domineering, but the truth was that Yunwuya was bitterly smiling inwardly. The disturbance had been far too great. If he didn't give an explanation, something major was bound to happen today. That fellow Marquis Qianjun also knew this, so he chose to watch from the sidelines for now. That bastard Qinyu, hurry up and stop. If this continued, he really wouldn't be able to last much longer. Playing around and delaying for time wasn't a problem, but if he wanted to use this method to scare away these people, humph humph, that was simply the ravings of an idiot. But even if he knew that he would have to lower his head sooner or later, he could only stubbornly hold on for now. He had already explained the reason. Yunwuya absolutely wouldn't watch helplessly as Qinyu was exposed. Right now, he was the king of the old king's bloodline. The 7-kill patriarch stepped forwards, his aura undisguised as he directly collided with Yunwuya. There was a loud explosion in the void, and countless distortions appeared, constantly breaking apart. Yunwuya, if being unreasonable was useful, then there was no need for us to come here. Either give me an explanation or take out the black token. Chapter 11:18. Good job, Elder 7 kills. At this moment, the demons gathered outside the blue tile courtyard were all praising him in their hearts. He had even mentioned the black token, so he was definitely serious. If Yunwuya wanted to play dumb, he wouldn't be able to do so, unless he really wanted to fight to the death with 7 kills. Putting aside today's situation, would he dare to fight to the death with the old king's bloodline? If 7 kills was killed, the ancient king's bloodline would lose one of their peak forces, but their foundation would still be there. But if Yunwuya was the one who died, humph, those trash of the old king's bloodline wouldn't even need anyone else to do anything. In reality, killing Yunwuya was the most direct and effective way to destroy the old king's bloodline. However, this sly old man was powerful and extremely meticulous, so it was very difficult to scheme against him. Of course, there had been people who had tried over the years, but they hadn't been able to kill Yunwuya and had instead suffered heavy casualties. In the end, they could only give up on this best option. Yunwuya glanced at Elder 7 kills and made a mental note to settle the score when he had the chance in the future. However, in this situation, he would only be able to exchange a few more words. It wouldn't be able to delay for too long. This was really troublesome. It was at this moment that the projection of the ancestral land above the green tile courtyard began to tremble. Like water that had been disturbed, it suddenly became blurry. It was about to dissipate. Marquis Qianjuan's expression changed slightly. He said in a low voice, "Elder Yunwia, please don't make things difficult for us. Otherwise, we will have no choice but to offend you today." He took a step forward and stood side by side with Elder Seven Kills. Their auras overlapped and pressed down on Yunwia. He was willing to watch the show, but he definitely wouldn't allow the old king's bloodline to conceal this matter. The battle for the new king's throne was imminent. Marquis Qianjun had to ensure that everything was under control. Yunwia's face was ashen. He was confident in facing 7 kills, but even he couldn't quite grasp Marquis Qianjuan's strength. Furthermore, it was clear that the two of them were going to work together. If he continued to stand in their way, they would definitely take the opportunity to attack. In fact, the two of them had even considered using today's opportunity to heavily injure him. He didn't expect to be killed on the spot. As long as he was severely injured, the old king's bloodline wouldn't be able to compete for the throne. Clan Elder, since Marquis Qianjun, Clan Elder Qi Sha, and the others want to be guests at my blue tile courtyard. Let them in. However, my bloodline has just evolved and I'm currently weak. I'm afraid I can't welcome all of you personally. Yunlan's weak voice rang in everyone's ears. Yun Wia's eyes lit up and he laughed angrily. Good. Since you have completed your breakthrough, this old man is no longer afraid of someone secretly attacking you. His cold eyes swept across the crowd. Didn't everyone want to go in? Please. He turned around and took a step forward. His figure disappeared with a whoosh. Elder Qi Sha's face was dark. Without any hesitation, he entered the blue tile courtyard. Marquis Qianjun furrowed his brows in surprise and followed behind. The rest of the demons also moved out. Yunlan sat cross-legged outside the nameless hall. Her face was slightly pale, and a trace of aura that hadn't dissipated yet surged around her. Following closely behind Yunwia was Elder Qi Sha. When his eyes fell on her, his complexion changed. This aura, in terms of cultivation, although Yunlan had also stepped into the demon commander level, there was still an astonishing disparity between them. But now he felt a trace of oppression from her. This was a suppression from the level of bloodline. In other words, the bloodline flowing through Yunlan's body was even stronger than his. No, to be more precise, it was of a higher grade. For the abyssal demons that used their bloodline as their foundation, a stronger bloodline meant greater potential. Elder Qi Sha himself already stood at the peak of the demon commander level. Although he couldn't compare to Yunwia, the difference wasn't too great. Yunlan's bloodline was stronger than his. In other words, she had the qualifications to attack the Demon King level. Thinking of this, Elder Qi Sha's complexion became increasingly ugly. When he looked at Yunlan, the gloominess in his eyes almost turned solid. Whoosh! Marquis Qianjuan's figure appeared. He glanced at Yunlan, and after a moment of silence, he revealed a look of praise. He cupped his hands together and said, "Elder Yunwia, congratulations." The ancient king bloodline had set up traps 3 times in a row, but none of them had been able to capture Yunlan. Now, she had actually completed her bloodline transformation. Although in the end it was because Yunlan's bloodline foundation was good, who could be sure that the ancient king bloodline didn't play a part in this? After all, pressure was motivation. After escaping death 3 times in a row, it wasn't impossible for her to accumulate enough strength to take the next step. Looking at the gloomy Elder Qi Sha, Marquis Qianjun sneered inwardly. Yunlan's bloodline transformation was enough to shatter all of his assumptions. A woman, he had actually believed it before, but now it seemed that it was ridiculous. It was absolutely impossible for a woman to arouse the strength of the ancestral land and cause a projection to descend. Such an important matter could even be mistaken. And because of this wrong information, He had wasted years of preparation. How laughable! Shwa, shwa. More and more demons appeared outside the grand hall. Their eyes gathered on Yunlan, their expressions dark and gloomy. Before the struggle for the throne, the old king bloodline's Yunlan had actually taken another step in his bloodline. Without a doubt, this greatly increased his chances of seizing the throne. If he really succeeded, then the glorious and arrogant ancient king bloodline would likely suffer great misfortune. Although the ancient king bloodline had a deep foundation and it was nearly impossible to completely eradicate them, this was only true for the direct descendants of the ancient king bloodline. It was far too easy to destroy some side branches. At this time in the crowd, the complexions of some demons changed. They couldn't help but reflect on whether or not they had been too close to the ancient king bloodline during this period of time. Obviously, they were the ones who could be categorized as a side branch. Yunwea saw all of this and felt refreshed. Then he coldly sneered, "Everyone you've come and seen. Do you have any other requests? Perhaps I can order some people to prepare some food and wine. Today, no one can leave and stay to eat and drink." Cough, cough. Tribal elder must be joking. Our previous attitudes were a bit offensive, so how could we dare disturb you again? That's right, that's right. Sir Yunlan has broken through today and is still a bit weak. Since it's time to rest, we will bid our farewells. I ask Sir Yunlan to rest well. In a few days, I will prepare a gift and personally visit to congratulate you as well as apologize for today's incident. Farewell, farewell. Their thoughts raced, and they didn't say much. After vaguely expressing their apologies and attitudes, they turned and left. Yunlan's bloodline had broken through, and the weak ancient king bloodline had the possibility of a counterattack, so they naturally had to change their attitudes. Otherwise, if they came to settle accounts in the future, everyone would be in trouble and no one would be able to think of a good outcome. They weren't from the ancient king bloodline, and they weren't Marquis 15,000 who had been recognized by the will of the abyss. How could they dare to be insolent? Even several demon race powerhouses that were close to the ancient king bloodline lowered their heads and hurriedly left. Although they didn't say anything, it was obvious from their dark expressions that they were cursing inwardly. Everyone had stood in line and watched as the situation turned out to be good. How did it turn out like this in the blink of an eye? Marquis 15,000's eyes were deep as he looked at Yunlan. He smiled and cupped his hands. Tribal Elder Yunwea, please forgive this offense. This Marquis will also take his leave. He glanced at Elder 7-Kill out of the corner of his eye and left without saying goodbye. This made the 7-Kill clan elders' already gloomy expression turn even uglier. Bastard! Although Marquis 15,000 had been wandering outside and hadn't truly united with the ancient king bloodline, he had basically guaranteed that he would advance and retreat with them. Today, he didn't even say a word and left just like that. It seemed inconspicuous, but the message this matter sent out was very bad. Snorting coldly, Elder 7-Kill turned and left. His figure flashed, and he caught up to Marquis 15,000. Marquis 15,000. Do you think that a junior from the old king's bloodline can defy the heavens and change fate? Marquis 15,000's expression was calm. This Marquis did not think so. He looked at Elder 7-Kill and could feel the surging anger in the latter's heart. He said indifferently, "But there is one thing I hope Elder 7-Kill can report back to the Patriarch. Some things are better investigated. Otherwise, we wouldn't have lost so many times and fallen into such a passive state. This is all I have to say. Farewell." With that, Marquis 15,000's figure flickered and disappeared, ignoring Elder 7-Kill's ashen face. Leaving on his own accord was one way of showing his attitude. Waiting outside the blue tile courtyard was another. Now that he had said what needed to be said and expressed his attitude, there was no need to stay any longer. Damn it! Elder 7-Kill growled. Of course he knew what Marquis 15,000 meant. The fact that Yunlan was a woman, this matter was complete nonsense. Thinking back to the time he had spent so much effort to obtain the secret, Elder 7-Kill's face burned even hotter, as if he had been slapped in the face several times. Damn it! This must be a trap set up by that sly Yun Wuya. Elder 7-Kill's eyes flashed fiercely as he thought back to how the clan had spared no cost to attack Yunlan 3 times after entering Erfeng City, but all of them had ended in failure. If not for Yun Wuya's preparations, Yunlan would not have been able to escape again and again. In fact, she had deliberately lured them into attacking. For this matter, the ancient king's bloodline had used all of their chess pieces. Their years of effort had all been for naught. In particular, Yun Wuya had taken advantage of this and caused the ancient king's bloodline to fall into a passive position. They had reaped a great deal of benefits and sympathy. The more he thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. Elder 7-Kill's face flushed red, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. That scoundrel Yun Wuya truly lived up to his reputation as a sly old fox. He was still as sly and cunning as ever. Otherwise, the ancient king's bloodline would not have fallen for it. He turned to glare at the blue tile courtyard before taking a deep breath and leaving. Chapter 1119. Outside the Nameless Temple, the pale Yunlan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. She met Yun Wuya's gaze and shook her head. Patriarch, rest assured. I only absorbed a portion of Qin Yu's aura and was shaken a little. There is no problem. Yun Wuya nodded. He swept his eyes around. Where is Qin Yu? Right now, in his mind, this kid's head was suddenly filled with the word King's Bomb, which was enlarged and bolder, shining with golden light. Moreover, there was a high chance that he was the reincarnation of an ancestor of the old king's bloodline. He couldn't help but be nervous. Yunlan stood up, after spitting out a mouthful of blood. Her complexion looked much better. I used a secret passage to send him to my residence, she hesitated. Her lips moved, and she looked at Yun Wuya. Yun Wuya waved his hand. I know what you want to ask, but I am not sure right now. How did Qin Yu perform? Yunlan was startled. She immediately understood what the patriarch was asking. She shook her head. When he walked out, he seemed a little disappointed. Because of the time, I didn't notice it. But I think that Qin Yu didn't know of this possibility. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to go through so much trouble to obtain my consent to carry out today's test. That makes sense. You are saying that when Qin Yu walked out, he seemed a little disappointed. Yun Wuya's eyes brightened, revealing a thoughtful look. His thoughts raced several times, and then he said, Yunlan, don't say anything else. Leave everything to me. Come, let's go see that brat now. Yun Wuya flicked his sleeves and brought Yunlan away. Yunlan's residence was the small courtyard where Qin Yu had come to visit her when she was recovering from her wounds. At the time, it had seemed ordinary. Besides being heavily guarded, there wasn't anything special about it. But now he realized that he had underestimated the methods of the old king's bloodline. With Yunlan's status and the matter of her disguise, the old king's bloodline would definitely protect her in all aspects. For instance, the chamber Qin Yu was in right now was beneath the small courtyard. Every inch of the chamber was covered with powerful demonic runes, and boundless demonic strength surged within. Although it wasn't aroused, one could vaguely feel the terrifying might contained within. Just now, he had been sent here by Yunlan through a secret passage. Thinking about it, there were several similar entrances in the blue tile courtyard. Once they entered, it would be extremely difficult for the outside world to break through. In fact, Yunlan's judgment was correct. When Qin Yu first walked out of the Nameless Hall, he was indeed filled with depression. This was because he felt that he had overestimated the power of his bloodline. After falling into the darkness, although he tried his best, he still wasn't able to persist for more than a quarter hour. Then he was completely suppressed by the wild pressure of the darkness, causing his bloodline test to end. However, what happened next caused Qin Yu's thoughts to stir once more. Yunlan was anxious, and as he looked at Qin Yu's eyes, it wasn't easy to describe. But in any case, it definitely wasn't like he was looking at a joke that overestimated himself. Although the projection of the nightmare ancestral land had already vanished when Qin came out, there were still remnants of its aura. He could only sense that Yunlan was in a hurry, and his mind was in a mess, so he didn't think much before he was sent here. Now that he thought about it carefully, things didn't seem to be what he had imagined. Of course, all of this was only Qin Yu's judgment based on what he knew. As for the specifics, he still needed to verify them. He took a deep breath, suppressing his thoughts. Then he slowly exhaled. It was useless to think too much about it now. Everything would become clear in a moment. All that mattered now was whether or not Yunwuya and Yunlan would arrive quickly. The difference between fast and slow represented a completely different degree of importance. Thinking of this, Qin Yu subconsciously lifted his hand. His fingertips tapped the table in a rhythmic manner. Suddenly, there was a light cracking sound, interrupting Qin Yu's train of thought. He looked at the stone table in front of him and saw that a crack had appeared on its surface. What the hell? Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. Then he reached out a hand and gently pushed outwards. The crack directly opened, revealing an exquisite and moving box. But then, Qin Yu's entire body froze. After the box was opened, he stared blankly at what appeared in front of him, his lips twitching. Women's clothes. There were large clothes and small clothes, but most of them were small clothes. In comparison to the same size, they weren't small at all. Yunlan's figure was truly excellent. My previous judgment wasn't wrong. Pa. Qin Yu lifted a hand and slapped his forehead, a bitter smile on his face. He thought that he really was crazy, thinking about these things at a time like this. He had to hurry up and close it. If he was seen, then he really would be regarded as a perverted peeping Tom. Just as Qin Yu was shaking his head and about to close the box, his complexion suddenly changed. The demonic runes on the surface of the chamber suddenly dimmed. It was truly sudden, without any warning at all. It had been flashing just a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye it had gone dark. Someone was coming. If MT Tai were to collapse in front of him, he didn't dare to say that he wouldn't pale, but at least he had a powerful will. But at this moment he was truly panicking. He reached out a hand and pressed down. With a light cracking sound, the box in front of him closed and the stone table returned to its original appearance. Qin Yu's reaction was extremely fast, but the speed of the person who came wasn't slow at all. As the box closed, Yunwuya and Yunlan passed through the walls of the chamber. Qin, you could clearly see that Yunlan's body stiffened and her face flushed red. As she looked at him, there was a bit of anger and shame in her eyes. It was over. He had been discovered by this woman. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that he had closed the box first. If he had been caught on the spot, then he really wouldn't have been able to defend himself. But now, since he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he had to maintain his composure. He couldn't panic. He absolutely couldn't panic. Qin Yu lightly coughed and pretended not to see Yunlan's current appearance. He took the initiative to ask, "Patriarch, what happened outside?" Yunwuya waved his hand. "It's nothing." But if he didn't explain at all, that clearly wouldn't do. He thought for a moment and vaguely said, "Because I tested your bloodline without permission, some people discovered me." There was a bit of a commotion, but it has already been calmed down. Strictly speaking, there wasn't anything wrong with these words. Today was indeed because of Qin Yu's bloodline test, which was why there had been such a commotion. Yunwuya was secretly pleased with himself. This was called the art of language. Even if Qin Yu learned the truth in the future, he still wouldn't be able to say anything. Qin Yu curled his lips inwardly. He thought to himself that he would be a fool to believe this old man. He was definitely trying to trick him. Although Yunwuya's words were vague, Qin Yu still obtained some information. For instance, his bloodline test seemed to have caused a commotion. Mediocre people never had the qualifications to stir up trouble. These words were harsh, but this was the truth. If you were mediocre and didn't do anything, no one would spare you a glance. Stirring up a commotion was a good thing for Qin Yu. In addition, Yun Wuya and Yun Lan had arrived so quickly. This was also proof. Yun Wuya glanced at Qin Yu and suddenly smiled. "You little friend Qin is very smart. I don't think I can deceive you. That's right, your bloodline test results are very good. To be more precise, you are far stronger than I imagined. No wonder you have the confidence to make such a ridiculous proposal as having the old king's bloodline support you and allow you to participate in the struggle for the throne. Qin, you certainly wouldn't become complacent after a few words of praise." His eyes flashed, and he grasped the crux of the matter. "Does patriarch mean that you agree to my proposal?" Yun Wuya sat down. He lightly said, "I admit that my heart is indeed moved, but what the throne involves is my entire nightmare clan. I cannot be careless in this matter. Although I have investigated a bit about little friend Qin's origins, the fog cannot cover up the truth. The fog cannot cover up the truth." Qin Yu's heart settled. Although Yun Wuya was acting as if he were asking about something, as long as his heart was moved, then he would have already succeeded. After a moment of silence, his thoughts raced. Then Qin Yu sighed. "I don't want to hide this from Patriarch, but my identity is a secret. I cannot tell anyone about it." This was the truth. Qin Yu didn't feel any pressure saying this. What sort of mind was Yun Wuya? He could certainly feel the emotions that came from the depths of Qin Yu's heart. His complexion didn't change, but his thoughts raced. He was only asking about his background, so why couldn't Qin Yu say it? Or perhaps this involved some secret, for instance, the reincarnation of the late king. Could it be that Qin Yu had already recovered some of his memories? Yun Wuya lightly coughed. "Little friend Qin, let me ask you something else. Why did you choose the bloodline of the old king?" He stared at Qin Yu, as if he wanted to see something from his reply. Qin Yu's heart chilled. What did this old thing mean? He felt as if there was a hidden meaning in his words. But here was the problem. He had to come back. He thought for a moment and said, perhaps it is a strange sense of familiarity. I feel that the bloodline of the old king has no ill intentions towards me. Of course, this is all a lie. The reason I chose the bloodline of the old king is because I ran into that woman, Yun Lan. Then, I was forced into marriage by you all. It was only when I had no other way out that I thought of this possibility. Across from him, Yun Wuya's eyes brightened. As Qin Yu's words fell into his ears, everything seemed to fit together. As he thought, everything was as he guessed. Qin Yu was absolutely the reincarnation of the late king. Although this seemed arbitrary, the bloodline aura that erupted out from Qin Yu just now was the best evidence. This question was only a confirmation. If Qin Yu wasn't the reincarnation of the late king, why would he feel close to the bloodline of the old king? There was no problem with this logic at all. It was no wonder that girl Yun Lan would be attracted to Qin Yu. It must be because the reincarnated body hadn't been able to control its own strength, leading to the attraction of the same bloodline. Yun Wuya suddenly thought of how Qin Yu had firmly refused to marry Yun Lan. That must have been his instinct. As Yun Lan's ancestor, even if he had lost his memories, his bloodline instincts wouldn't allow him to do something that went against all ethics. This was another piece of evidence. It matched, there was no way to escape. Although the king of the old king's bloodline has perished, he has completed his reincarnation and returned to the bloodline of the old king. Although losing his memories was no small regret, the fact that the late king was able to reincarnate was already a pleasant surprise. But how did the clan obtain information that the late king had completely vanished? This was something that Yun Wuya had personally verified. Although the bloodline of the old king was weaker than the bloodline of the ancient king, no one dared to conceal this matter from them. That's right, the late king must have deliberately laid down this fog in order to avoid being assassinated. Only then was he able to quietly and safely complete his reincarnation. After all, although the cultivation of the late king's reincarnated body wasn't weak, It hadn't reached a level where he could freely roam the abyss. Yunwei took a deep breath and looked at Qinyu, a warm smile on his face. Since you can't say it, then don't say it. I believe you. Qinyu revealed a stunned expression. His eyes widened as he looked at Yunwei, who had a friendly expression on his face and didn't seem to be faking it. Could someone tell him just what was going on? I just made up a few words and didn't do anything else. So why do you believe me? Are you sure you aren't playing with me? But if this is true, then aren't you letting down your title as a sly old fox? Also, with this level of skill, how did the old king's bloodline survive to this day under your leadership? Qinyu rubbed his temples. He really didn't understand. Chapter 1120. Like this, the cooperation with the previous king's bloodline had been achieved. Qinyu watched as the beaming Yunwei left. He took a deep breath, feeling that this matter was a bit unrealistic. He glanced at Yunlan. This woman definitely knew something. The way she looked at him revealed very complicated emotions. Surprise, sadness, embarrassment, anger. There were also a few other emotions. But Qinyu was already confused. He thought that at most he had accidentally glanced at the clothes she had hidden away. Was there a need to look at him like that? Your Excellency Qinyu, please follow me. Yunlan bowed. She turned and led the way. This was her place of refuge. So she naturally couldn't allow Qinyu to stay here for too long. The patriarch had asked her to arrange Qinyu's living quarters. One reason was because he valued Qinyu, but the other reason was that he hoped she could adjust her mentality as soon as possible and extinguish some thoughts that she shouldn't have. The reincarnation of the previous king, he really was the reincarnation of the previous king. Yunlan bitterly smiled, bitterness in her eyes. In this life, the first man to break into her heart and make her fall in love with him was destined to be the one she would never be able to obtain. Even though Qinyu had lost all his memories from before his reincarnation, the bloodline connection between them meant that it was impossible for them to be together. She took a deep breath and suppressed the bitterness in her heart. Since this was something that had already been decided, there was no need to think about it any further. Time would erase everything. Qinyu's living quarters were arranged in the blue tile courtyard. This was the largest courtyard, and had always been the king's residence. After the previous king was suppressed by the world of living beings, this courtyard had been sealed off. In these past years, it had only been opened a few times to receive truly honored guests. The courtyard was luxurious and grand, so there was no need to say much. Qinyu inquired about it, and when he learned that this was the residence of the Nightmare King, a strange light flashed in his eyes. He looked at Yunlan. When they were in the chamber, he could feel that this woman exuded a distant aura. It wasn't indifference. On the contrary, her attitude was far more intimate than before, as if she were deliberately putting distance between them. But not too long ago, Yunlan had been thinking of every possible way to force Qinyu to agree to marry her and become one with her. This contrast was far too great. Furthermore, the change in his attitude seemed to have occurred right after Yunwei expressed his trust in him. There had to be a relationship between them. Qinyu's thoughts raced. He felt as if he were about to grasp something, but he was always just a tiny bit off. It was at this moment that outside the courtyard, actually calling it a courtyard wasn't appropriate, because the area in front of them was astonishingly a group of grand palaces. A demon from the Blue Tile Monastery came to visit and respectfully presented a command token lying quietly in a red velvet box. He said that it was the token of the highest authority in this palace complex. Qinyu would move in and obtain the authority token. There was nothing wrong with this. Therefore, even though he knew that things were definitely not that simple, he still couldn't find a reason to avoid it. At this moment, out of the corner of his eye, he could sense that Yunlan was looking at him. Although he tried his best to remain calm, there was still a trace of nervousness in his eyes. It was just a token of authority. Was there a need for him to act like this? There was an inside story, there was definitely an inside story, and it probably involved a lot of things. Qin nodded and reached out to take the token. He poured his own demonic power into it according to the instructions. The token in his hand emitted a light hum. The runes on its surface lit up, emitting a faint halo of light. In the next moment, the quiet palace complex in front of him seemed to have awakened from a deep slumber. The doors opened on their own, and countless lights lit up at the same time, releasing a dazzling light as if welcoming the return of their master. With a loud thud, the demon that came to deliver the token fell to his knees, his face filled with excitement. His body shivered, and he couldn't speak a single word. He could only kowtow towards Qin, causing deep thumping sounds to echo out. Yun Lan bit her lips. The last bit of hope in her heart dashed to nothing. From this moment on, there was no longer a need to doubt Qin Yu's identity. He was indeed the reincarnation of the late king. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to activate this token that the late king had personally refined. In the blue tile monastery on another high platform, Yun Wuya saw the palace gates open and the lights light up. At this time, he reared his head back and laughed, his voice billowing with endless joy and excitement. The king had returned. The king born from the old king's bloodline had returned once more. Without a doubt, in Yun Wuya's eyes, this struggle for the throne had ended ahead of time, even though it hadn't begun. The old king's bloodline. No, they would be called the true royal bloodline. They would rise once more and wield the highest authority of the nightmare race. Soon, the only one left in the massive palace was Qin Yu. As he stood in the empty hall, the heart of the abyss in his chest began to beat faster and faster. This wasn't nonsense. In fact, at this moment, there really was a familiar feeling that surged in the depths of his heart. This place, he definitely hadn't been here before, so what was this familiar feeling? Perhaps there was only one possibility. That was the abyssal bloodline that flowed through his body. Suddenly, a spark exploded in his mind. Qin, you connected everything that had happened since the bloodline test began. Finally, he caught on to a thought, and this thought could explain all the puzzlement and confusion in Qin Yu's heart. For example, why had Yun Wuya expressed absolute trust in him? Why had Yun Lan taken the initiative to distance himself from him? What about the command medallion and the reaction of the devils who had given him the command medallion? All of these things served to confirm what he was thinking. Sometimes intuition wasn't accurate, but the sense of familiarity in his heart couldn't be faked. The previous king's bloodline had probably connected him to the previous king of nightmares, who had completely disappeared. For instance, seizing his body, reincarnating, or becoming his successor. This misunderstanding was far too great. Qin Yu didn't doubt that if this was exposed in the future, the old king's bloodline would definitely skin him alive. But I didn't say anything about this at all. This was all thought up by you guys. Cough, cough, it has nothing to do with me. He lifted a hand and knocked his forehead, calming himself down. Then he looked at the token in his hand that had already been restored to its original appearance. This thing was clearly a verification method. It was most likely related to the already dead Nightmare King. The reason Qin Yu was able to activate it was because he had seized the Nightmare King's bloodline. In other words, as long as he didn't take the initiative to die and speak of this matter, it was basically impossible for others to see through him. Moreover, even if he took a step back, even if there was a chance that he would be exposed in the future, he absolutely couldn't retreat now. Could he give up this chance because of this uncertainty? Of course not. Then there was nothing to worry about. Qin Yu's eyes hardened. He took a deep breath and muttered, I am the reincarnation of the Nightmare King. I am the reincarnation of the Nightmare King. That's right, I am. Old Fox and Hei Tiangang received a notice from the blue tile courtyard and were allowed to enter. The two old demons' first thought was, could this be the gates of hell? Entering was easy, but they feared they wouldn't be able to come out again. But soon, they glanced at each other and suppressed this thought. It was absolutely impossible for Qin Yu to be quietly dealt with, since they hadn't sensed any movement at all. That meant there was a high chance they hadn't turned hostile yet. Then they had to go in. On the surface, They were at an absolute disadvantage facing the blue tile courtyard. Just a single Yunwea was enough to suppress them. But they couldn't just look at the surface, right? Could their Qin Yu be treated as an ordinary person? Humph, humph. If we didn't have this bit of confidence, we wouldn't have dared to stay outside the blue tile courtyard. If they really turned hostile, it was unknown who would laugh and cry in the end. After encouraging themselves, Old Fox and He Tiangang followed the demons from the blue tile courtyard and entered through a side door. Along the way, they encountered several waves of demons. Most of them were in a hurry, but they couldn't suppress the joy in their eyes. This caused Old Fox and He Tiangong's eyes to flash. It seemed that the rumors were true. The old king's bloodline, Cloud Billow, had made a breakthrough, greatly increasing his chances of fighting for the throne. In fact, they had already expected this. When they were standing guard outside, they had seen many demons come to visit the blue tile courtyard. Most of them were turned away, but those demons didn't seem dissatisfied at all. Their smiles were still incomparably bright, and they left behind their gifts no matter what. Without waiting for the blue tile courtyard to refuse, they ran away at an astonishing speed. However, this wasn't good news for them. The stronger the old king's bloodline was, the more dangerous it would be to turn hostile with them. Although they all believed that Qin Yu definitely had some hidden card, it would be best if they didn't turn hostile. The two old demons were filled with confidence one moment and worry the next. In truth, this was all because of Liao Shi's sudden departure. The reason why they chose to believe in Qin Yu and follow him could even be said to be because of Liao Shi. It was because of her strength that Qin Yu's status was highlighted. It was because of her trust that Old Fox and He Tiangang chose to believe in her. But with Liao Shi's sudden departure, even though these two old demons were still respectful towards Qin Yu, the truth was that there was a subtle change in their moods. And as time passed, this change became increasingly clear. This was an extremely dangerous signal. If Qin Yu couldn't find a way to continue strengthening himself, then sooner or later there would be a major problem with his position in their hearts. You too, Qin Yu is staying here. I can only send you up to here. Please go in. The blue tile courtyard's demon smiled. As he looked at the two, there was a trace of envy in his eyes. Old Fox and He Tiangang calmed down. A demon commander was powerful, but that also depended on where they were. They had personally experienced just how proud the demons of the blue tile courtyard were. In these past 2 days, there had been many demon commanders that had come to deliver gifts. Although they were courteous and attentive, it was rare to see such a welcoming smile. It seemed that not only was Qin Yu fine, but his relationship with the previous king's bloodline seemed to have improved. The two old demons were a bit dizzy. How come this was so bad that they were about to fall out with each other, and now they were so good that even the demons of the blue tile courtyard had to look up to them? He stepped into the range of the royal palace. Yes, it was the royal palace. It was only after Qin Yu moved in that he learned the name of this place. This palace complex had been specially built for the previous Nightmare King. Old Fox and He Tiangang glanced at each other, surprise on their faces. Qin Yu's current treatment had broken through the heavens. Could he have married into the blue tile courtyard? But even so, he shouldn't have his current status. Excuse me, are you Old Fox and He Tiangang? A demon smiled as he appeared in front of them. Demon commander. Moreover, he was strong. Although he couldn't compare with He Tiangang, he still made them feel threatened. When the two nodded, his smile became even brighter. Sir Qin Yu has been waiting for a long time. Please follow me. That's right, my clan's elder and young master Yunlan are also in the palace. As soon as they entered the palace, the two old demons saw Qin Yu sitting in the main seat and their eyes widened. They recognized Yunwea, so it was fine if he sat in the lower seat. After all, this was Qin Yu's residence, and he could be considered the master for the time being. But Yunlan was pouring wine for Qin Yu. Were they seeing things? No, they definitely weren't seeing things, but with Yunlan's current status, Qin Yu could actually sit there and let him pour wine for him. Crazy. He must be crazy. At this moment, even though Qin Yu hadn't done anything, his figure in the hearts of the two old demons began to wildly swell. This was because after Liao Shi left, the trace of instability that was formed disappeared in the blink of an eye. Sirs, indeed, sir. The person in front of us is the successor of the previous king's bloodline, an existence that could possibly seize the throne of the Nightmare King. Greetings, young master. Old Fox and He Tiangang quickly stepped forward and bowed. Qin Yu glanced at them. He felt that there was something wrong with the attitude of these two old fellows today, as if they were even more respectful than before. There was no time to delve into the thoughts of Old Fox and He Tiangang. Qin Yu smiled and said, "Rise." He turned to Yun Wuya. "Clan Elder, these two are my trusted aides. They can absolutely be trusted." Chapter 11:21. Yun Wuya nodded. He didn't doubt Qin Yu's words. In reality, those who could enter the royal palace today were all trustworthy people. After all, even though the blue tile courtyard had undergone a cruel purge, there was no guarantee that no one had escaped. Two demon commanders, especially this one, his strength is extremely tyrannical. If he can participate in the plan, we'll have more confidence. Yun Wuya smiled and said, "Time is of the essence, and I still have other arrangements to make. I'll have to trouble young friend Qin to explain these two." Qin Yu stood up. "Patriarch, take care." Yun Wuya waved a hand. "Please wait." He nodded at He Tiangang and left with Yunlan. In the abyss, strength was everything. Only those who were strong enough would be respected. In comparison, even though Elder Fox was also a devil commander in Yun Wuya's eyes, he was nothing special. Of course, the feeling of being looked down on by others was not a good one. However, if Old Fox could not even endure this, he would not have lived to this day. He bitterly smiled and said, "Young master, what is going on? I feel like you've been hiding a lot during this period of time." It wasn't that he didn't know what to do. Since Qin Yu had called them here today, he was definitely prepared to explain everything. Now that he had taken the initiative to ask and start conversation, he was tactful. This was Old Fox's strong point. He didn't have enough power, but he had enough EQ. Qin Yu smiled. "Old Fox, you have a good attitude. Then let's get down to business." His expression turned solemn. After thinking for a while, he realized that there was really nothing much to say. Although he had thought through the entire process, he still felt that it was inconceivable. So he would simply say it. "I have reached an agreement with the old king's bloodline. They will give me their full support to participate in the contest for the throne of the Nightmare King. Yes, that's all." Old Fox and He Tiangang's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. They had guessed that Qin Yu's relationship with the old king's bloodline must have progressed. But isn't this development a bit too terrifying? Just what did you do to make the previous king's bloodline agree to something so ridiculous? Moreover, why, although the three magnates were fighting fiercely, this was ultimately an internal affair of the Nightmare clan. You are an outsider. What right do you have to participate in the fight for the throne? It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense anywhere. Qin Yu rubbed his chin. "I know you must be surprised. In truth, the process of this matter has been quite tortuous. In short, this is what happened. You don't need to think about it any further." Gulp. The two old demons gulped down a mouthful of saliva. They looked at Qin Yu in front of them and thought, "Are you about to take off?" It was much faster than they had imagined. The King of Nightmares was indeed a pretty good position. With a single leap, he had become an influential figure in the abyss. Perhaps this was what Miss Liao meant when she said, "His Excellency Qin Yu inherited the destiny of the Dark Abyss and would accomplish the great cause of unifying the Dark Abyss. We are about to participate in the creation of history. Perhaps many years later, we will become a part of a glorious epic. For example, on a certain day, the emperor suddenly summoned Huan He and decided on a great plan in Yifeng City to launch an expedition to the abyss. Just thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotions. He felt as if his blood was on the verge of boiling. With Old Fox and He Tiangong's age, status, and experience, it was almost impossible for such a situation to occur. However, the two of them had thought too highly of this matter, raising it to the level of glory and mission. Exchanging glances, the two old demons simultaneously knelt on one knee, lowered their heads, and said in a deep voice, "The two of us pledge our loyalty to you." Qin Yu's face stiffened. He felt that Liao Shi must have secretly said something to these two old demons. Otherwise, why would they act like this? From the looks of it, even if they had to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of flames, these two old demons wouldn't hesitate. They had definitely been brainwashed. Just what did Liao Shi say to stimulate them so much? Could it be that he was trying to trick them into ruling the dark abyss? Thinking of this possibility, Qin Yu felt a chill crawl down his back. Disregarding Liao Shi's fearless personality, he really couldn't rule out this possibility. Get up, let's get down to business." Qin Yu hurriedly changed the topic. As a result, the two old demons in front of him looked at him with even brighter eyes. His Excellency is indeed His Excellency. Even though he had already completed such a crucial leap, he was still able to maintain his composure and didn't let victory get to his head at all. As expected, he was a dragon amongst enlightened masters. That's right, in the eyes of Old Fox and He Tiangang. Since Qin Yu had reached an agreement with the bloodline of the old king and obtained their full support, the position of King of Nightmares was already in his bag. What ancient king? What new faction? They could all die. If anyone dared to compete with His Excellency Qin Yu, they would be tired of living. Yes, young master. The two respectfully stood to the side. Qin Yu felt that these two old demons were already beyond cure. Even if he explained that they were overthinking things, these two old demons wouldn't believe him. They would only think that he was deliberately keeping a low profile. Whatever, let them think what they wanted. In any case, he would have to leave the dark abyss sooner or later. At that time, he could do whatever he wanted. Before you arrived, Yunwuya and I were discussing the upcoming nightmare beast hunt. Qin Yu glanced at them. Old Fox respectfully said, "We have heard of this matter. It is a test that the nightmare race has set up to determine the new king. In the end, the top 10 will enter the Heaven's Choice platform based on the number of nightmare beasts hunted. The rest will be eliminated." He Tiangang added, "During the nightmare beast hunt, you can bring subordinates with you. The number is limited to 7, and the strongest is limited to the Demon Commander realm." Qin Yu nodded with satisfaction. "Very good. It seems that you haven't been idle these past days. Since you know the general content, I won't repeat it." He paused for a moment and then continued. "Yunlan will disappear during this nightmare beast hunt, and I will take advantage of this opportunity to participate in the struggle for the throne." Old Fox's eyes brightened. It seems that the old king's bloodline has already made preparations. What a good plan! Using Yunlan, who is destined to be abandoned, in exchange for a massive amount of benefits. He, the family successor, has been killed. This is a great mental blow. Anyone involved in this will not be able to escape easily. He stroked his beard and continued to say, "If I'm not wrong, the old king's bloodline will definitely drag some people into the water in a public setting and make it a fait accompli that Yunlan was killed. At that time, when the yellow mud falls on their pants, it will be the same as well." TSK, clever, too clever. I have long heard that the old king's bloodline's elder Yunwei is quick-witted and extremely shrewd. When it comes to playing with the hearts of others, he is a first-class master. Now that I've seen him, he truly lives up to his reputation. His reputation as a sly old fox is well-deserved. Praising Yunwei came from his heart, but in your heart, you don't seem to like this old fellow too much. Mocking him a little is the best choice. Old Fox, am also an expert in manipulating the hearts of others. How could I make such a low-level mistake? Qin Yu's face stiffened. If Yun Huia was a sly old fox, then what was he? After all, this plan had been drawn up by the two of them together. Hey, Tiangong's lips twitched. It was true that he wasn't good with words, but he wasn't stupid. Those that had the talent to touch upon the threshold of the Demon King were peak existences in every aspect. Of course, he could sense that Qin Yu's current expression was a bit unnatural. Hee. This old fox had likely flattered the wrong horse this time. Old Fox groaned inwardly. He didn't know either. As the saying goes, those who don't know are not to be blamed. I'm sure you can understand, right? Damned old black dog, what kind of expression is that? Are you trying to provoke your anger? If I suffer, then don't think you'll have a good time either. Hey, Tiangang coughed. Sir, old who didn't sleep well last night, so he doesn't think before speaking. Please don't lower yourself to his level. Qin Yu angrily waved his hand. That's enough. That's how it is. You should all be prepared in advance and cooperate well when the time comes. Old Fox wanted to make up for his mistake. He hurriedly said, Sir, there are 3 of us, and the other 3 are from the old king's bloodline. Can we trust them? Qin Yu said, Don't worry, there's no problem in this aspect. They won't dare to mess around. Now that he understood what Yun Huia was thinking, Qin Yu felt much more at ease with the old king's bloodline. Of course, even though Qin Yu knew, he still had to act as if he didn't know anything. Otherwise, how would he deal with him? His relationship with the old king's bloodline would be a difficult problem. When Yun Huia faced him, it would be very awkward. To put it bluntly, how he addressed him was a problem. Although Qin Yu was happy to see Yun Huia embarrassed, hiding himself was undoubtedly the best choice. At the very least, he would be able to gain an advantageous position in his cooperation with the old king's bloodline. Thus, he wouldn't tell Old Fox or He Tiangang about this matter for now, lest he expose himself. Although he didn't know where Qin Yu's confidence came from. Since he said there was no problem, it was clear he had some degree of confidence. Old Fox and He Tiangang nodded, not speaking any further. After a moment, they spoke a few more words. Then, Qin Yu sent the 2 away to make preparations. The nightmare ancestral land, just what was it? After he went in, could he really be promoted to the king's step? If he really became the Nightmare King, then with Yun Huia's current mentality, he might not allow him to give up the throne. This was something that could be seen from the fact that he hadn't even mentioned Qin Yu's previous promise. In other words, Qin Yu had a chance to sit firmly on the throne. This was a great temptation. After all, the abyss was the mortal enemy of the world of the living. If Qin Yu could control the nightmare race, then at a critical moment, they would absolutely be a great killing tool, a trump card that could reverse the situation. Whatever, thinking about this was useless. He would just take it one step at a time, let alone anything else. He would first seize the Nightmare King's throne. The Nightmare Beast Hunt was the first step. 5 days later, the Council of Nightmare Elders finally extricated themselves from Yun Huia's entanglement. Then, they impatiently announced that the Nightmare Beast Hunt would begin at noon the next day. In truth, this had already been delayed from the original plan. It was only because of Yun Huia's endless pestering that they had been delayed until now. This bastard, he had seized on the matter of Yunlan being assassinated 3 times and had relentlessly demanded a great deal of benefits from him. Moreover, he had forced the Council of Elders to guarantee that if Yunlan was harmed again, they would have to give the old king's bloodline a satisfactory answer. If it weren't for the fact that this bastard was strong enough, he would have already been beaten to a pulp. How could he have been allowed to jump around until now? Did he really think that old farts could be casually scolded? As Yun Huia left the Council of Elders station in Evil Peak City, he could roughly guess what those old farts were muttering to themselves. But he didn't care. He had offended enough people in these past years, so a few more didn't matter. More importantly, He had one precious time for the old king's bloodline. Cooperating with Qinyu was unexpected, and allowing Yunlan to be killed was an even more unexpected surprise. An unprepared plan might not necessarily fail, but there were far too many variables, and it was easy for things to spiral out of control. Yun Wia certainly couldn't allow his good cards to be ruined. Thus, he stubbornly pestered the Council of Elders and even displayed a face that didn't know when to advance or retreat. Losing points was certain. He feared that there were several old fellows in the Council of Elders who had good relations with the old king's bloodline that would grumble in their hearts. But all of this was worth it. Hee. In particular, he had obtained a guarantee from the Council of Elders. Once Yunlan died in the Nightmare Beast trial, that would be fun. Yun Wia licked his lips, excitement in his eyes. This time he was going to play big. He had to swindle some compensation from the Council of Elders. But more importantly, someone had to take responsibility for Yunlan's death. Hum. If he didn't teach these people a profound lesson, they would think that he was made of clay. In the blink of an eye, the second day arrived. At noon, with a deep rumbling sound, the channel leading to the Nightmare Beast territory was opened. The hunt had officially begun. 2. Chapter 1122. Yun Wia glanced at Qinyu. Their gazes met in midair, and they nodded. There was no need for words. Let's go. Yunlan was still the leader of the team on the surface. He waved his hand and stepped into the channel. Although it was called a channel, the truth was that it was a giant black hole formed after the ground collapsed. It was pitch black without end. As Yunlan entered, he was like a stone falling into deep water. There wasn't even the slightest ripple before he vanished from sight. Taking a deep breath, Qinyu leapt up. In the next moment, his entire body quivered, as if he had fallen into icy water. A bone-chilling cold invaded his body. The heart of the abyss in his chest began to beat, pushing his blood energy to the limit. The wildly invading cold immediately eased. Although it was still bone-chilling cold, it was only limited to the surface of his body. Qinyu suddenly realized something. The Nightmare Beast territory was a hunting space unique to the Nightmare race. Any outsider that intruded would be erased by the power of ice. Although he hadn't truly resisted it, from the brief contact just now, it was clear just how terrifying the power of ice was. Old Fox and Hei Tiangang didn't possess the Nightmare bloodline. So how were they able to resist the invading power of ice? Thinking about it, Yun Wuya had already made arrangements. It seemed that the Nightmare race had done a great deal of research into the Nightmare Beast territory. Before Qin, you could think further. The icy cold around him instantly dissipated. In the next moment, the darkness shattered and light sprinkled down once more. Pa! His feet landed on the ground. His eyes swept around like lightning. When he didn't sense any danger, his tense body relaxed a little. Yun Wia had already given him incomparably detailed information regarding the Nightmare Beast territory. To be more precise, the place they were in right now could also be seen as a layer of the abyss. It was just that in the process of nurturing it, some accidents had occurred, causing space to become extremely unstable. The entire world was in a kind of state, still in the process of transformation. It was also because of this special environment that the Nightmare Beast was born, a creature that existed between reality and illusion. The reason it was called illusory was because it didn't have a physical body. It was more like a life form of energy. But the Nightmare Beast had a heart within its body. Of course, it didn't move blood, but constantly swallowed and spat out abyssal demonic power to strengthen itself. The Nightmare Beast clan viewed the Yang's territory as a whetstone, a test for the new king. But in reality, to the Yong, the Nightmare Beast clan members who had intruded into their territory were also their hunting targets. The Nightmare Beast hunted, they hunted the Nightmare Beast. And at the same time, the Nightmare Beast hunted them. Shua! Shua! Behind Qinyu, Old Fox, Hei Tiangang, and the others all appeared. As his heart relaxed, it was only now that he was able to clearly see what was happening. The space in front of him had suddenly split open, as if it were opening its mouth and spitting them out. This method of entry, it was really quite strange. A mana crystal appeared in Yunlan's hand. After injecting mana into it, it lit up and projected a detailed map in the air. Then he took out another cone-shaped stone and held it in his hand, injecting mana into it as well. The surface of the stone began to glow with a red light. After several breaths of time, a red dot slowly appeared on the map that was projected from the void. Seeing the location of the red dot, Yunlan's expression relaxed slightly. He said, "Fortunately, our luck is not bad. The entrance, this time, is not in the danger zone." As she finished speaking, she glanced at Qin Yu waved his hand. "Although I obtained the information, my understanding of the Nightmare Beast territory is limited. You can decide what to do on your own." The 3 demon commanders of the old king's bloodline were respectively named Cloud Mountain, Cloud River, and Cloud Void. They all had calm expressions. It was clear that before they entered the Nightmare Beast territory, they had already received instructions from Yunwia. It was hard to say exactly how much they knew, but it was clear that Qin Yu was the most crucial core of their group. Yunlan didn't beat around the bush. He directly said, "When we kill the nightmare beasts, the hearts they leave behind will produce a strength that can nourish the soul. To us abyssals, this is a rare and precious treasure. So, even though the various clans have no hope for the throne, they will still send people into the Nightmare Beast territory in order to collect the Nightmare Beast's heart. So, according to the estimates of the tribal elder, there will be at least 100 squads that have entered the Nightmare Beast territory. Regardless of whether or not the plan can proceed smoothly, we must ensure that we can kill a sufficient number of Nightmare Beasts and obtain a spot in the top 10. That is the most important matter." She took a deep breath and swept her eyes over everyone. "If there are no problems, then let's immediately set out to hunt the Nightmare Beasts." After she finished speaking, she identified a direction and hurried towards a place marked on the map where the Nightmare Beasts were gathered. In fact, before they even arrived at their destination, a sudden battle had already occurred. The one that attacked them was a nightmare beast that looked similar to a demon wolf. The only difference was that its eyes were translucent and there was a hazy mist rising up from within, making it hard to see clearly. Unfortunately, the nightmare beast's target of attack was Old Fox. This caused the old fellow's complexion to turn ugly. Yunwia was strong enough and his status was also honored. Even if Old Fox felt humiliated, he could only grit his teeth and endure it. But now, a tiny nightmare beast actually dared to bully him. This was simply disgraceful to the extreme. The group of 7 hadn't chosen anyone but had attacked him. Wasn't this the same as saying that he was the weakest persimmon? Old Fox hatefully attacked. In just a few moves, the nightmare beast was smashed to pieces, displaying the strength of a demon commander. Thus, Qin Yu saw with his own eyes the process of the nightmare beast's heart condensing. After it died, its body disintegrated without a single drop of blood flowing out. Instead, it turned into pure energy. Then, this energy collapsed inward. In the blink of an eye, a nightmare beast's heart the size of a knuckle condensed. Of course, although it was called a nightmare beast's heart, the truth was that it looked more like a pure energy crystal. It was pale blue and faintly transparent. Old Fox took the nightmare beast's heart. Although he was also curious about this thing, he didn't hesitate and offered it to Qin Yu with both hands. Qin Yu smiled and didn't refuse. He took it. Yunlan said, "You only need to pour in a bit of demonic power and the nightmare beast's heart will be stimulated." Qin Yu nodded. Demonic power surged from his hands and the nightmare beast's heart lit up. Pa! With a light sound, the nightmare beast's heart shattered into powder. Then, a cool strength fused into Qin Yu's body. His spirits rose and his eyes brightened. Qin Yu carefully sensed it, and a happy expression lit up his face. The strength of the nightmare beast's heart was also useful to his soul. Although the increase wasn't too great, in terms of the intensity of Qin Yu's soul. Even if it was just a tiny increase, it was still amazing enough. And most importantly, he confirmed that he could also use the nightmare beast's heart. It seemed that this thing was only limited to the soul and not just abyssal life forms. At this time, a thought suddenly popped up in Qin Yu's mind. The abyss and the world of the living were diametrically opposed to each other. Both sides were naturally hostile to each other. So why didn't there seem to be much difference in their souls? Seeing Qin Yu's happy expression, Yunlan waited for several breaths of time before asking, "What is it?" Qin Yu shook his head. "It's nothing. The nightmare beast's heart really can enhance the intensity of the soul." As he spoke, he suppressed this thought. Yunlan said, "My abyssal demon race is born with a formidable bloodline. As long as we absorb holy energy and stimulate our bloodline, we can obtain formidable strength. But in terms of the soul, that is a shortcoming of all abyssals. My race's souls are formidable, and we even have all sorts of inheritances that target the level of the soul. But the truth is that this strength is passed down through our bloodline." She swept her eyes over everyone. "So, entering the nightmare beast territory is also a lucky chance for all of you. Following this, all of the nightmare beast's hearts that you obtain, unless it is absolutely necessary, will temporarily be given to me. But once the results are calculated, I will return them to you." Yun Shan, Yun He, and Yun Kong revealed looks of pleasant surprise. They bowed. "Thank you, sir." When they entered the nightmare beast's territory before, although they had obtained the nightmare beast's hearts, they had only obtained an extremely small portion. Now, looking at Yunlan's intentions, she actually wanted to return all of the nightmare hearts they obtained. Just this alone would increase the profits of this line of work by more than several times. Qin Yu glanced at the three people whose faces were flushed red. He was sure that in the following hunt they would go all out. From Yunlan's actions, it seemed that she was a bit cautious and uncertain about this nightmare beast hunt. With their strength, it shouldn't be difficult for them to reach the top 10. As if sensing the puzzlement in Qin Yu's eyes, Yunlan thought for a moment. Then, her voice suddenly sounded out in Qin Yu's ears. "I always feel that this nightmare beast hunt won't go smoothly. You can think of this as my intuition. But believe me, my experiences over the years have proven that my intuition is extremely accurate." Qin Yu nodded in understanding, but he couldn't help but curl his lips inwardly. If you really had such a powerful intuition, how come you didn't discover that someone was trying to harm you before? Isn't this all thanks to me saving you time and time again? Otherwise, wouldn't you know what sort of situation you would be in right now? Let's continue. The old king's bloodline's map was extremely accurate. Soon, led by Yunlan, they found a place where the nightmare beasts gathered. In front of them was a mountain valley. Inside lived a herd of nightmare beasts that looked like wild horses. But between their lips, there were fangs that were several feet long, and their bodies were covered in pitch-black scales. They could barely be called similar. We call these nightmare beasts fierce horses. The reason is because they are incomparably cruel and violent, and they have an extremely strong sense of territory. Once they sense that an outsider has intruded, they will immediately riot and wildly attack the outsider. Of course, this is also the advantage. Their relationship with other nightmare beasts is extremely poor. We can boldly attack without worrying about attracting other nightmare beasts and being surrounded like dumplings. Yunlan gave a simple explanation. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. This sort of ill-tempered and ill-liked nightmare beast was quite good. He coughed and said, "Then shall we attack?" Yunlan glanced at him. "Wait a moment." He turned to look at Cloud Mountain, Cloud River, and Cloud Void. The three demon commanders of the old king's bloodline cupped their hands together, and then each chose a direction to leave in. Soon, Qin, you could feel some changes in the air. Chapter 11:23. A barrier gradually appeared, wrapping around the entire mountain valley. Although it couldn't completely prevent the aura from leaking out, It could weaken it by a great deal so that it wouldn't spread too far. Cloud Mist said, "We aren't afraid of attracting the nightmare beasts, but we aren't the only ones here. Although it's rare for accidents to occur in the nightmare beast territory, it's always better to be cautious." Qin Yu rubbed his nose. This woman was quite smart. How come he hadn't sensed it before? When Cloud Mountain, Cloud River, and Cloud Sky returned, Cloud Mist took a deep breath and said, "Attack!" Bang! Wild fluctuations of strength erupted. A fierce nightmare beast near the entrance was smashed to pieces and condensed into a nightmare beast heart. This was like poking a hornet's nest. Within the mountain valley, all the fierce nightmare beasts roared out in anger and wildly rushed forwards. Rumble, rumble. The sound of hooves was like raging waves, causing the entire mountain valley to tremble. Before, it was said that the nightmare beast hunt was two-faced. It was the nightmare race that hunted the nightmare beasts, but it was also the nightmare beasts that hunted them. Now that the nightmare race had made their move, how could the nightmare beast tribes that had lived in this world for generations not act? Within the giant cave, there were clear signs of excavation. Although it was incomparably rough, once the scope reached a certain degree, it actually seemed grand and majestic. Powerful nightmare beasts gathered in the cave. Their bodies were incomparably large, and each one emitted a terrifying aura. The nightmare race has intruded into our territory once more. According to our agreement, when they begin hunting, we can also attack and hunt down their descendants. In the center of the cave, a giant crocodile-like nightmare beast slowly spoke up. Its deep and deep voice echoed throughout the cave. Another giant ant beast roared. Our nightmare beast race is not some slave raised by the nightmare race that they can kill as they please. Why can they incite a slaughter every time and then leave with the strength of our children? We should attack and kill them all. That's right. The 1,000-foot large ant beast angrily roared. Its giant legs constantly moved back and forth, smashing the ground. Cracks appeared and wildly spread outwards. Within the cave, the other giant beasts became restless because of the ant beast's actions. The atmosphere heated up. The giant crocodile suddenly flicked its tail. Its huge tail struck out like lightning and sent the giant ant flying. It crashed heavily into the cave and rolled to the ground. "Shut up!" The giant ant beast was attacked, and its eyes turned blood red. It screeched and crawled up. Its huge limbs moved quickly, pushing its body towards the giant crocodile. But very quickly, it fiercely slammed into the stone wall again. A long wound was torn open on its hard carapace, and wisps of smoke-like energy were constantly dispersing. The giant crocodile rose from the ground and stared coldly at it. "Ant King, if you dare offend me again, I will kill you." The giant ant beast roared angrily, but it did not dare to move forward. The difference in strength between it and the giant crocodile king was even more shocking than it had imagined. Inside the stone cave, the kings of the other races saw this and extinguished some of the thoughts in their hearts. The giant crocodile king snorted coldly and continued scanning the great hall. "Our Nightmare Beast clan is not strong enough to contend against the Nightmare Beast clan. Therefore, we can only be passive. It's not easy for us to maintain the current situation. I have already determined that the Nightmare Beast clan will soon choose a new Nightmare King. If you dare to attack and provoke an Abyss King, you can imagine what fate awaits my clan." It let out a deep breath. Its voice became even louder, filled with cruelty and killing intent. "So, all of you better behave yourselves. Do not recklessly interfere and break the rules. Otherwise, I will absolutely kill him." Within the stone cave, the giant beasts all lowered their heads. Yes, Giant Crocodile King. The nightmare beasts did not have a true king. These so-called kings were the most formidable existences in their respective races. Strictly speaking, they could only be considered pseudo-kings. Their strength had barely reached the threshold of the king's step, and the giant crocodile king was the most formidable of them all. although on the surface it seemed to have equal status with the other kings of the other races. But in reality, it had already surpassed the kings and had become the true ruler of the Nightmare Beast clan. Perhaps the giant crocodile king was not far from becoming a true king, and it was because of this that it did everything it could to maintain a balanced situation and avoid direct conflict with the Nightmare Beast clan. It needed time. The Stone Cave Conference ended, and the kings of the various races left. The giant ant beast returned to its lair in Black Gold Mountain. It immediately killed 2 of its subordinate ant commanders and chewed them up before eating them. The terrifying wounds on its body immediately began to rapidly heal. The other giant ant beasts in the hall all fell to the ground in panic, fearing that their king would eat them up in the next moment. "Scram! All of you scram!" The giant ant beast angrily roared. Its giant body paced back and forth, causing the entire underground cave to tremble. After eating 2 ant commanders that had always coveted its throne, although the Ant King's injuries were recovering at an accelerated rate, the anger in its heart did not diminish. The giant crocodile king had actually humiliated it in front of everyone during the throne conference. This had completely swept away its prestige and made it a joke in the eyes of all the kings. How hateful! How hateful! That damned giant crocodile king. But even though it was angry, it couldn't help but admit that the giant crocodile king possessed a strength that far surpassed what it could resist. Even though it was humiliated, it could only silently endure it. This undoubtedly intensified the burning anger in the Ant King's heart. Bang! Bang! The ground couldn't withstand it. As the Ant King's anger burned, it vented its strength. With a loud rumble, cracks began to appear. At this time, the Ant King's complexion changed. It fiercely looked up and locked onto the space in front of it. In the violent shaking, a giant crack appeared. A deep voice sounded out from within. "Ant King, I have come on the orders of the giant crocodile king to explain something to you." As it spoke, a giant black wolf beast drilled out from the spatial crack. Its body was over 1,000 feet long, and its aura was tyrannical. "Black Wolf King, what are you doing in my territory? The giant crocodile king injured me and made me lose face. So why did he send you to mock me?" The Ant King angrily roared. Although the Black Wolf King was a king of a race, he was still willing to submit to the giant crocodile king and had always been looked down upon by other kings. Thus, facing him, the Ant King didn't fear him at all. The Black Wolf King shook his head. "Ant King, there is no need to be angry. I came here on orders to explain something to you. In today's throne conference, the giant crocodile king had no choice but to attack you. He had his own difficulties. This involves a secret of the giant crocodile king. After Ant King learns of this, you absolutely cannot tell anyone else." "Secret?" The Ant King shook its giant head, its 2 antennae trembling. "Tell me, what secret is it?" The Black Wolf King took several steps forwards and lowered its voice. "The secret is, the giant crocodile king wants me to kill you, you giant hindering ant." It opened its mouth and spat out a breath that mixed with the power of wind and ice. The Ant King was caught off guard and was sent flying backwards. Countless wounds appeared on its body, and then it was frozen solid by the ice-cold strength. "Black Wolf King, you dare to attack me? I will kill you." The Ant King was enraged. It never thought that the Black Wolf King, who was weaker than it, would dare to attack it. But soon, the Ant King's roars were replaced with fear. "Black Wolf King, you hid your strength. You deserve to die." Rumble, rumble. The entire underground cave violently shook as the 2 giant beasts crazily slaughtered each other. The ant army guarding outside didn't rush forwards. Some turned and left, but some didn't even have time to react before their necks were bitten off by sharp teeth from behind. On a hill that wasn't too high, there was a team hidden. As they looked at the tyrannical aura coming from the Black Gold Mountain, they were pleasantly surprised. They had quietly come here because they had chosen the Ant King. After killing it, they would take its king step nightmare beast heart. But they never imagined that before they could do anything, a fierce battle would erupt on the Black Gold Mountain. Although they couldn't clearly feel it, if it could fight with the Ant King, then it must be another incomparably powerful king-step nightmare beast. Perhaps they could be the fishermen that reap the benefits. At the very least, they would be able to kill a severely injured Ant King. The difficulty would be much lower than they imagined. Everyone, restrain your auras. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack. A demon shouted out, a sharp light surging in his eyes. The Ant King felt fear. The Black Wolf King was far too strong. Although it couldn't compare to the giant Crocodile King, it was far more terrifying. Its injuries hadn't healed to begin with and had been ambushed by the Black Wolf King. Now, it found it increasingly difficult to support itself, and it felt as if it would collapse at any moment. Although it didn't know why its subordinates outside hadn't come in yet, it also didn't know why the Black Wolf King dared to kill it. But none of this was the key point. The key point was that if it didn't run away now, it really might die as the master of the Black Gold Mountain. The Ant King never imagined that it would be chased down in its own territory. Bang! In order to force back the Black Wolf King with injuries, the Ant King crazily dug a hole in the mountain. The incomparably hard black gold stone was as fragile as tofu in front of its legs. Run! It had to escape. Then it had to gather the kings of the other tribes and publicize the evil deeds of the giant Crocodile King. If anyone dared to attack it today, then tomorrow it would be their turn. The kings of the Nightmare Beastland had to unite and overthrow the giant Crocodile King's rule. Since they wanted to kill it, they would have to pay a heavy price. The Ant King gnashed its teeth in hatred. It dug even faster. In several breaths of time, it had dug a channel through the Black Gold Mountain. With a loud whoosh, it soared into the skies and flew into the distance without hesitation. Why didn't the Black Wolf King follow? Its speed wasn't much slower. A restless feeling rose in the Ant King's heart. Its giant compound eyes swept around, and its two long antennae constantly flickered in the air. This was a unique investigative method of the Nightmare Beast race. But before it could determine the situation, there was a loud shout. Attack! Bang! In the skies, a mass of demonic light exploded. Then it turned into a giant net that covered the wounded Ant King. Zeelala, there was a terrifying corrosive sound. As the net touched the Ant King's body, its incomparably hard carapace was easily corroded. The net drilled into its flesh and blood. Nightmare Demon Race. Damn it, damn it! The Ant King angrily roared. Giant Crocodile King, you actually joined forces with the Nightmare Demon Race. Even if I die, I won't let you off. Chapter 11:24. It finally understood why the Black Wolf King did not attack again. It was because the giant Crocodile King clearly wanted to use the Nightmare Demon Race to kill it. That way, the giant Crocodile King would not be in trouble. Although it did not know what the net was, the instant it was locked down, the Ant King knew it could not escape. However, the giant Crocodile King could not hide this matter. Even if it died, it would announce today's events to the entire Nightmare Beast territory. Not good. Retreat. The surrounding devils' faces fell, and they turned and fled without the slightest hesitation. In the next moment, the Ant King, whose flesh and blood had been drilled into by the net, suddenly exploded. The terrifying power destroyed everything. The net was torn apart, and several devils were sent flying, blood spurting from their mouths and noses. Then, the image of an enormous Ant King appeared in the air. It howled. The giant Crocodile King and the Nightmare Demon Race are working together to kill me. The giant Crocodile King and the Nightmare Demon Race are working together to kill me. The giant Crocodile King and the Nightmare Demon Race are working together to kill me. The Ant King repeated it 3 times. His voice spread in all directions and landed in the ears of countless nightmare beasts. They flapped their ears in shock and disbelief. Then they turned to flee without hesitation. Pa! Pa! What's wrong with this Ant King? Why did it self-destruct? And it said we were working together with the giant crocodile king? What the hell? A devil coughed up blood and wiped his mouth with a dark expression. Originally, they had made ample preparations. As long as they paid a small price, they could slowly grind the Ant King to death. But who would have thought that this Ant King would not act according to common sense? Before they could do anything, it self-destructed. The Nightmare Beast King cherished its life. Otherwise, it would not have been so cowardly for so many years. How strange. The only good news was that they only wanted to kill the Ant King. Then, the Nightmare Beast's heart would automatically condense. Self-destruction did not affect this. Soon, a palm-sized Nightmare Beast's heart appeared where the Ant King self-destructed. It was completely purple and had no impurities. Pah! A devil flew into the air and grabbed it. He shouted, "Let's go!" The Ant King's self-destruction caused too much of a commotion. It would definitely attract the attention of the other Nightmare Beast Kings. They had to leave quickly. Quick! 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 He had to get the heart of Nightmare to Qi Zhen before the other Beast Kings arrived. Roar! With a loud roar, the demon actually ignited the demonic energy within his body, causing his flying speed to soar. A moment later, he staggered to the ground and raised the Yang's beast heart in his hand. Young master, this lowly one was fortunate enough to not fail the mission. Soon, someone took away the Yang's heart and sent it into the cave. Inside the cave, a table was placed on the ground, and behind it sat a young man. His manner was calm and dignified. There were several people sitting or standing on both sides of the table. If someone was here, they would immediately recognize that the person on the left side of the table was the trusted aide of the city lord of Erfing, the demon commander expert named Shanghai. He opened his eyes and looked at the king-step, nightmarish beast heart in the devil's hand. His eyes flashed with a bright light. He stood up and cupped his hands together. "Congratulations, young Master Qizhen. Now that you've obtained the king-step nightmare beast's heart, you'll definitely be able to thoroughly awaken your bloodline." The other powerhouses from the ancient king's bloodline bowed, joy on their faces. Who could have imagined that one of the ancient king's descendants would awaken their ancestral bloodline? Moreover, they would be able to completely inherit the bloodline of the previous king. Although it was impossible for this awakening to come with the memories of their previous lives, they could still inherit the strength of the previous king's powerful bloodline. Now, with just a bit more, young Master Qi Zhen's bloodline would thoroughly awaken, and this king-step nightmare beast's heart was the key to making up for this final flaw. Once he succeeded, there would be no suspense in the struggle for the throne. The previous king's bloodline, Cloud Billow? Humph humph. It was just a bloodline breakthrough that caused the projection of the ancestral land to descend. He simply couldn't compare with young Master Qi Zhen. After all, as long as he completely awakened his bloodline, he would have all the conditions to become the King of Nightmare. Behind the table, Qi Zhen laid down his teacup. He lifted a hand and grasped the Yang's beast heart. Within the cave, the powerhouses that belonged to the ancient king's bloodline erupted with their auras, brazenly locking onto Chun Hai and the others. Although everyone here could be trusted, they couldn't allow any accidents to occur at this critical moment. Chun Hai and the others had calm expressions, without the slightest change in attitude. They completely released their auras, allowing others to lock onto them. Qi Zhen faintly smiled. Without hesitation, demonic energy erupted from his palm, wrapping around the king-step nightmare beast heart. Kacha! There was the sound of shattering. A crack appeared on the surface of the Yang's beast heart, and a massive amount of energy gushed out, fusing into Qi Zhen's body. His entire body shook, and he subconsciously looked up. On the surface of his face, complex demonic runes began to appear, weaving together and covering his entire face. Although it was strange, it also gave off an incomparably dignified and formidable feeling. The many demons in the cave all gasped for breath. They could feel a formidable suppressive aura coming from Qi Zhen's body. This was a suppression that came from the level of bloodline. King bloodline, this was indeed the true king bloodline. Kacha! Kacha! Cracking sounds rang out one after another. The number of cracks on the Yang's beast heart rapidly increased as more strength gushed out. Qi Zhen's body floated upwards. His aura became increasingly strong. The runes that covered his face began to spread out to other parts of his body. The Abyss King had obtained the approval of the Abyss Will and was bestowed with undying demon marks, and now Qi Zhen's undying demon marks were in the process of awakening. Ah! A loud roar came from Qi Zhen's mouth. His eyes flashed open, a faint golden light flowing deep within them. As his eyes swept over them, the many demon powerhouses in the cave felt their hearts shake. Pah! The king-step nightmare beast heart shattered into pieces. All of its strength had been absorbed. Without any hesitation, everyone fell to their knees. Congratulations to Sir Qi Zhen for awakening his king bloodline. A struggle flashed in Qi Zhen's eyes. But in this situation, no one noticed it, and he soon calmed down. He lowered his head and glanced at the crowd. The corner of his lips curled up, and he revealed a faint smile. He then said, "Rise." His voice was calm, but for some unknown reason, as everyone heard Qi Zhen's voice, their hearts chilled and they couldn't help but feel fear. Was this the fully awakened strength of the king bloodline? It was truly terrifying. The demon commanders of the ancient king's bloodline were ecstatic. Their young master had successfully awakened his bloodline. Even if this provoked the nightmare beast kings, it was completely worth it. As long as Sir Qi Zhen became the new king, he could naturally suppress everything. No matter how unwilling the nightmare beast kings were, they could only endure it. But that was a matter for the future. Right now, it was best to leave as soon as possible. After all, in the face of a group of enraged nightmare beast kings, things could easily spiral out of control. "Sir, there was an accident when we were hunting the Ant King. Nightmare beast kings will soon arrive. We should leave immediately." The nightmare beast hunt had just begun, but to the ancient king's bloodline, they had already completed their mission. As for their rankings, even if they left now, they would still be in the top 10. The ancient king's bloodline had already made arrangements for this. Qi Zhen's eyes flashed. He lightly said, "We cannot leave now. After I awaken my bloodline, I sense something interesting. There is something I need in the nightmare beast territory. I can only leave after I obtain it." The complexions of the demon commanders in the cave changed. This was outside of their plans, but looking at Qi Zhen's calm expression, no one dared to question his decision. "Don't worry. Unless the false kings of the nightmare beast territory want to provoke a war with my nightmare race, they can only lower their heads. At most we will give them some compensation." Qi Zhen slowly said, as if everything was under his control. "The Qi family's direct descendant demon commanders can stay behind. Everyone else can withdraw for now." Qinghai and the others stood up and left. After leaving the cave, they all had worried expressions. Although Qi Zhen wasn't wrong, the rebellion of the nightmare beast territory's false kings was absolutely difficult to deal with. If they weren't careful, many of them might perish here. But Qi Zhen had already spoken. Unless they defied his will, they could only stay behind. As for Qi Zhen, seizing the throne was only a matter of time. Perhaps they wouldn't fear the successor of the ancient king's bloodline, but they had no choice but to respect the future Nightmare King. Within the cave, Qi Zhen flicked his sleeves. The air suddenly thickened, isolating them from the outside world. "Young master, do you have any orders?" A demon commander bowed. Qi Zhen gently tapped the table. After several moments of thought, he revealed a cold smile. "I can sense someone. He must die. Take this demon crystal and you'll be able to sense his position. Remember, no matter who he is, I want him dead. Do you understand?" Several demon commanders from the ancient king's bloodline felt their hearts turn cold. But without hesitation they bowed. "Yes." Qi Zhen waved his hand. "Go." One of the demon commanders picked up the demon crystal. After respectfully bowing, he turned and left the cave. Without pausing, he soared into the skies and vanished without a trace. Qinghai and the others watched as these people left. They all whispered in their hearts, but they didn't say anything. Soon, Qi Zhan walked out of the cave. He smiled and said, "We will wait here. After all, the aura of a king-steppe nightmare beast's heart isn't something that can dissipate in a short period of time." The demon commanders respectfully bowed. They bitterly smiled inwardly. If you send out the ancient king's bloodline descendants, then we will likely suffer a calamity. But in the current situation, they could only brace themselves and agree. In the mountain valley, the last fierce nightmare beast was blown to pieces with a despairing roar. Then the chaotic buzzing in everyone's ears finally quieted down. Qin Yu looked at the nightmare beast's heart in his hand. He wanted to try absorbing it again, but he glanced at Yinlan and suppressed this thought. Right now, she was the leader of this group on the surface. He had already given the order not to embarrass her. Even if Qin Yu really absorbed it, no one would say anything. As everyone was busily cleaning up the battlefield and calculating their harvests, Qin Yu's complexion suddenly changed. He turned and looked into the distance. At this moment, his eyes turned pitch black, becoming incomparably deep. It was like he had crossed through the barriers of space and was looking into the distance. Within his chest, the heart of the abyss fiercely beat. Then he sensed an ancient and powerful aura. Although he didn't know who it was, his instinctive awe and hostility was enough to determine that this person wasn't a good person. Faintly, Qin Yu became aware of something. It seemed that this change had occurred because of the bloodline within his body. Had the nightmare race given birth to another powerful descendant that was strong enough to form a resonance with him? Soon, the aura in the distance vanished. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He looked at Yinlan not too far away and whispered, "I fear there will be trouble." Could it be that this woman's intuition was about to come true? It really was true. When it should have been accurate, it wasn't accurate, and when it shouldn't have been, it was damn accurate.